When Titans Walked Among Us. The morning mist rolled across the prehistoric valley like a living thing, parting to reveal a world that would seem impossible to modern eyes. Here, in the heart of the Jurassic period, the very air itself felt heavier, thicker with oxygen, pregnant with the sounds of life on a scale we can barely imagine. A thunderous footfall shook the ground, sending ripples through puddles that reflected a sky unmarred by any trace of human civilization. The owner of that footstep stood 40 feet tall at the hip, its neck stretching another 30 feet into the canopy of primitive conifers. This was Brachiosaurus, and it was merely average-sized for its time. For 150 million years, creatures of impossible magnitude dominated every corner of our planet. They ruled not through intelligence or technology, but through sheer physical supremacy. The giants of the Mesozoic era represented nature's most ambitious experiment in the possibilities of life, pushing the boundaries of biology to limits that have never been reached again. From the smallest of their kind, no larger than a chicken, to behemoths that weighed as much as a dozen elephants, dinosaurs occupied every ecological niche imaginable. They swam in the oceans, though they were not dinosaurs themselves, those marine reptiles that shared their world. They took to the skies on wings of membrane and later feathers. They prowled the forests as apex predators with teeth like railroad spikes, and they gathered in vast herds that stretched from horizon to horizon, transforming entire landscapes with their passing. But this is not merely a story of size and spectacle. It is a mystery that has captivated human imagination since the first fossilized bones were pulled from the earth and recognized for what they truly were: evidence of a lost world.
How did creatures grow so impossibly large? What confluence of evolutionary pressures, environmental conditions, and biological innovations allowed them to achieve sizes that seemed to violate the very laws of physics? And perhaps most hauntingly, why did they vanish so completely that for millions of years no creature even approaching their magnitude walked the earth again? The story begins not with the giants themselves, but with a planet in transformation. Earth in the Triassic period, some 250 million years ago, was a place of recovery. The greatest extinction event in our planet's history had just concluded, wiping out 90% of all marine species and 70% of terrestrial vertebrates. The Permian-Triassic extinction event, known to paleontologists as the Great Dying, had reset the evolutionary clock. The world that emerged from this catastrophe was empty, waiting to be filled. And from this emptiness came opportunity. The first dinosaurs were not giants. They were small, bipedal creatures, no larger than a dog, darting through the underbrush of Pangaea, the supercontinent that contained all of Earth's land masses pressed together like a child's clay creation. These early archosaurs, the ruling reptiles, possessed a unique combination of traits that would prove to be the foundation of their future dominance. Their legs were positioned directly beneath their bodies, not sprawling to the sides like those of lizards and crocodiles. This upright posture was revolutionary. It allowed for more efficient locomotion, better breathing during movement, and the ability to grow larger without the mechanical constraints that limited their sprawling cousins. But the journey from these humble beginnings to the colossal sauropods and tyrannosaurs of later periods was neither simple nor guaranteed. It required a perfect storm of evolutionary innovation and environmental conditions that would never quite align the same way again in Earth's history.
The story of how dinosaurs became giants is also the story of how Earth itself changed during their reign.
creating a feedback loop between life and environment that produced some of the most remarkable creatures ever to exist. Consider the world they inhabited. During much of the Mesozoic era, global temperatures were significantly warmer than today. There were no polar ice caps for most of this time. Palm trees grew in Antarctica, and tropical forests extended far into what are now temperate zones. The atmosphere contained different proportions of gases, with some periods experiencing oxygen levels significantly higher than our current 21%. Carbon dioxide concentrations were also elevated, creating a greenhouse world where plant life exploded in abundance and diversity. This wasn't just a warmer world. It was a fundamentally different planet, with different rules and different possibilities. The evolution of gigantism in dinosaurs didn't happen overnight. It was a gradual process that took millions of years, with different lineages independently discovering the advantages of large size. The sauropods, those long-necked giants that have become synonymous with dinosaur magnificence, began their journey to gigantism in the late Triassic period. Early sauropodomorphs like Plateosaurus were already showing the telltale signs of what was to come. Elongated necks, small heads relative to their bodies, and a trend toward quadrupedal locomotion that would allow them to support greater weight. But why grow large at all? In the modern world, we see that the largest land animals, elephants, are still dwarfed by even modest-sized sauropods. What advantages did size confer that made it worth the enormous metabolic cost and the engineering challenges of supporting such massive bodies? The answers are multiple and intertwined, creating a web of evolutionary pressures that pushed dinosaurs toward gigantism again and again. First, there was the matter of predation.
In an evolutionary arms race that lasted millions of years, herbivorous dinosaurs grew larger to escape predation, while carnivorous dinosaurs grew larger to continue hunting them. This Red Queen hypothesis, named after the character in Lewis Carroll's Through the Looking Glass who must run constantly just to stay in place, drove both predator and prey to ever greater sizes. A 20-ton Apatosaurus was simply too large for most predators to tackle, but evolution's response was to produce predators like Allosaurus, which could grow large enough and hunt cooperatively to bring down even massive prey. Then there was the efficiency factor. Large animals have lower metabolic rates per unit of body mass than small animals. This means that a 100-ton sauropod needed proportionally less food per pound of body weight than a 1-ton animal. In a world of abundant plant life but potentially scattered high-quality food sources, being large enough to travel vast distances efficiently while processing enormous quantities of lower-quality vegetation became a winning strategy. The largest sauropods could strip entire trees of their foliage, processing plant matter in their enormous guts where bacterial fermentation could break down even the toughest plant fibers. The dinosaurs' unique respiratory system also played a crucial role in enabling their gigantism. Unlike mammals, which breathe using a bellows-like action of the diaphragm, dinosaurs inherited from their archosaur ancestors a system of air sacs that extended throughout their bodies. These air sacs, similar to those found in modern birds, created a one-way flow of air through the lungs, making oxygen extraction far more efficient than the tidal breathing system used by mammals. This meant that dinosaurs could extract more oxygen from each breath, supporting the massive metabolic demands of their enormous bodies even in lower oxygen environments. Furthermore, these air sacs invaded the bones themselves, creating a honeycomb-like structure that was both strong and light. A sauropod vertebra, the size of a coffee table, might be surprisingly light when picked up, its interior filled with air spaces that reduced weight without significantly compromising strength. This pneumaticity, as scientists call it, was like nature's version of aerospace engineering, allowing dinosaurs to build bodies that would have been impossibly heavy if constructed of solid bone.
The cardiovascular challenges of gigantism were equally daunting. How does a creature pump blood up a neck that stretches 30 or 40 feet into the air? The pressure required would be enough to burst blood vessels in the brain when the head was lowered. Scientists have proposed various solutions, from multiple hearts to special valves and blood pressure regulation systems. The fact that sauropods succeeded in solving this problem, living for potentially hundreds of years, and reaching sexual maturity at sizes that still dwarfed most modern animals, speaks to the remarkable evolutionary innovations that made their existence possible. But the giants were not merely successful, they were dominant in a way that no land animals have been since. They shaped entire ecosystems around their needs. Sauropod herds transformed forests into savannas through their feeding, creating open habitats that were then colonized by other species. Their dung fertilized vast areas, supporting complex communities of insects, small vertebrates, and plants specially adapted to grow in nutrient-rich sauropod latrines. They were ecosystem engineers on a scale that makes modern elephants look like gardeners tending a small plot. The predators that evolved to hunt these giants were no less remarkable. Theropod dinosaurs, the group that included all carnivorous dinosaurs and eventually gave rise to birds, produced some of the most formidable predators ever to exist.
Tyrannosaurus rex, despite being perhaps the most famous, was actually a relative latecomer to the giant predator niche. Earlier giants like Giganosaurus, Carcharodontosaurus, and Spinosaurus had already explored the possibilities of multi-ton terrestrial predation. These creatures combined size with sophisticated hunting adaptations, binocular vision for depth perception, serrated teeth that could slice through hide and muscle, and powerful legs that could, despite their mass, propel them at speeds that would allow them to catch even swift prey. The success of giant dinosaurs wasn't limited to land. The Mesozoic seas teemed with marine reptiles that, while not dinosaurs themselves, were part of the same great age of reptilian gigantism. Mosasaurs, the great marine lizards, reached lengths of 50 feet or more. Plesiosaurs, with their impossibly long necks or powerful short-necked pliosaur variants, filled the role of marine apex predators. And in the skies, pterosaurs, the flying reptiles that were cousins to dinosaurs, achieved sizes that seemed to challenge our understanding of the physics of flight. Quetzalcoatlus, with its 40-foot wingspan, was essentially a flying giraffe, as tall as one when standing on the ground, and capable of soaring across continents on wings of membrane and hollow bone. This was a world where giants ruled every domain, where size was not a limitation, but an advantage, where the biggest creatures ever to walk, swim, or fly through Earth's environments thrived for a period of time that makes human civilization look like a brief flicker. For 150 million years, through changing climates, shifting continents, and evolutionary pressures that we are only beginning to understand, the giants persisted. They survived massive volcanic eruptions, asteroid impacts that would be considered catastrophic by our standards, and changes in sea level that repeatedly reshaped the world's coastlines. Yet despite their success, despite their dominance, despite their remarkable adaptations and the sheer diversity of forms they evolved, the giants vanished. Not gradually, not through slow replacement by better adapted creatures, but suddenly, cataclysmically, in what amounts to an instant in geological time. The asteroid that struck the Yucatan Peninsula 66 million years ago ended their reign so thoroughly
that for millions of years afterward, no land animal larger than a medium-sized dog survived. The world that emerged from that catastrophe was one where mammals, previously confined to the shadows and margins of dinosaur-dominated ecosystems, would inherit the Earth and eventually produce their own giants, though never quite on the same scale. But the story doesn't end with extinction. In many ways, it continues today. Every bird that flies past your window is a living dinosaur, a descendant of theropod dinosaurs that survived the extinction and carried the dinosaur legacy into the modern world. The giants may be gone, but their descendants still fill our skies, reminding us that evolution's experiments in form and function continue, even if the age of true giants has passed. As we delve deeper into this story, we will explore not just what these creatures were, but how they lived, how they grew so large, what their world was like, and ultimately, what their rise and fall can teach us about our own place in Earth's history. The tale of the dinosaurs is more than just a story of prehistoric monsters. It is a window into the workings of evolution, the relationship between life and environment, and the fragility of even the most successful forms of life when faced with sudden, catastrophic change. The architecture of giants. Engineering the impossible. To understand how dinosaurs achieved their colossal size, we must first appreciate the fundamental engineering challenges that any large land animal faces. Every creature that has ever lived on land has had to contend with gravity, that invisible force that constantly pulls mass toward Earth's center. For small animals, gravity is barely noticeable. But as size increases, gravity becomes an increasingly ruthless adversary. The weight of an animal increases with the cube of its linear dimensions, while the cross-sectional area of its supporting structures only increases with the square. This is the tyranny of the square-cube law, and it means that as animals get bigger, they must devote proportionally more of their body structure to simply supporting their own weight. Consider an elephant, the largest land animal alive today. An African bush elephant can weigh up to 6 tons, and its legs are essentially pillars of bone and muscle, positioned directly beneath its body to support this immense weight. Its bones are thick and dense. Its movements are relatively slow and deliberate, and it spends up to 18 hours a day eating to fuel its massive body. Now imagine an animal 10 times heavier, or 20 times, or even 30 times. This was the reality of the largest sauropod dinosaurs, creatures like Argentinosaurus that may have weighed upwards of 90 tons, or potentially even more. How did they not simply collapse under their own weight? The answer lies in a remarkable suite of evolutionary innovations that transformed dinosaur bodies into biological masterpieces of engineering. The story begins with their bones, but not in the way you might expect. While we might assume that supporting such massive weight would require the densest, most solid bones possible, sauropod dinosaurs took the opposite approach. Their bones were marvels of lightweight construction, filled with air spaces that reduced weight while maintaining strength. This pneumatization, inherited from their archosaur ancestors and perfected over millions of years, meant that a sauropod vertebra could be up to 50% air by volume.
These air-filled bones were not weak or fragile. Like modern bird bones, they were structured with a complex internal architecture of struts and braces that provided strength where it was needed
while eliminating unnecessary material. Think of them as nature's version of the steel I-beams used in skyscraper construction, where material is concentrated along lines of stress, while the spaces in between are left hollow. This design principle allowed sauropods to build necks that stretched 40 feet or more in length, without creating an impossible burden for the rest of their body to support. But pneumatic bones were just the beginning. The entire sauropod body plan was optimized for supporting massive size while maintaining functionality. Their vertebral columns were engineering masterworks, with each vertebra precisely shaped to distribute weight and provide attachment points for powerful muscles and tendons. The neural spines that projected upward from their vertebrae were often extraordinarily tall, particularly over the shoulders and hips, providing leverage for the muscles that supported their long necks and tails. In some species, these spines were so tall that they created a visible ridge or sail along the animal's back. The neck itself presents one of the most fascinating engineering challenges in the history of life. How do you support a structure that might weigh several tons, extends horizontally for dozens of feet, and needs to be mobile enough to feed? Sauropod necks were not simply scaled-up versions of other animal necks. They were unique structures that combined multiple innovations. The vertebrae were connected by sophisticated ball-and-socket joints that allowed for flexibility while maintaining strength. Powerful nuchal ligaments, similar to, but far more developed than those found in modern horses and cattle, ran along the top of the neck, acting like the cables of a suspension bridge to support the neck's weight. These nescial ligaments attached to the tall neural spines over the shoulders, creating a biological cantilever system. When a sauropod lifted its head, these ligaments would help support the weight, reducing the muscular effort required. Some scientists have proposed that these ligaments could store elastic energy, making neck movements more efficient by recycling energy from one movement to the next. The entire system was so well designed that despite their enormous size, sauropods could move their heads and necks with surprising grace and precision, delicately stripping leaves from branches or reaching high into trees that no other herbivore could access. The cardiovascular system of giant dinosaurs presents another set of seemingly impossible challenges. How do you pump blood up a vertical distance of perhaps 40 feet from heart to brain? The pressure required would be enormous, far greater than any modern animal produces. A giraffe, with its relatively modest 18-foot height, already requires special adaptations, including an extraordinarily powerful heart, blood pressure twice that of humans, and special valves in its neck arteries to prevent blood from rushing back down when it lowers its head. Scale this problem up to a sauropod, and the challenges become even more daunting. Scientists have proposed various solutions to this problem. Some suggest that sauropods had multiple hearts or heart-like organs along their necks to boost blood pressure in stages. Others propose that they had extraordinarily powerful single hearts, possibly weighing hundreds of pounds, with thick muscular walls capable of generating the necessary pressure. Still others suggest that sauropods couldn't actually raise their heads very high, keeping them mostly horizontal to reduce the vertical distance blood needed to travel. The debate continues, but the fact remains that sauropods lived successfully for over 100 million years, so whatever solution they evolved clearly worked.
The respiratory system of dinosaurs was perhaps their most crucial adaptation for achieving gigantic size. Unlike mammals, which breathe in and out through the same airways in a tidal pattern, dinosaurs inherited from their archosaur ancestors a flow-through respiratory system, similar to that of modern birds. Air sacs connected to the lungs extended throughout their bodies, even into their bones, creating a one-way flow of air through the lungs. This system is far more efficient at extracting oxygen than mammalian lungs, allowing dinosaurs to maintain the high metabolic rates necessary for active lives despite their enormous size. These air sacs served multiple functions beyond respiration. They acted as an internal cooling system, helping to dissipate the heat generated by massive bodies. In a large sauropod, the problem of overheating would have been severe. With their relatively small surface area compared to volume, they had limited ability to lose heat through their skin. The air sac system, with fresh air constantly flowing through the body core, would have helped regulate temperature. Some scientists have even suggested that the long necks and tails of sauropods served partly as radiators, with their large surface area helping to dissipate excess heat. The digestive system of giant herbivorous dinosaurs was another marvel of biological engineering. To support bodies weighing tens of tons on a diet of plant material required extraordinary efficiency in processing food. Sauropods didn't chew their food. Their small heads and weak jaws were designed for cropping vegetation, not grinding it. Instead, they relied on their enormous guts to break down plant material through fermentation. Their torsos were essentially massive fermentation vats, where plant material could be broken down by bacteria over days or even weeks. This fermentation-based digestion had several advantages. It allowed sauropods to extract nutrients from tough, fibrous plant material that other animals couldn't digest. It also produced heat as a byproduct, helping to maintain body temperature. The size of their digestive systems meant they could process enormous quantities of relatively low-quality food, strip mining entire forests of their foliage. Some scientists estimate that a large sauropod might have consumed over a ton of vegetation per day, passing it through a digestive tract that could have been over 100 feet long. To help break down this plant material, many herbivorous dinosaurs swallowed stones called gastroliths, which would grind food in their muscular gizzards, similar to modern birds. These stones have been found associated with dinosaur fossils, sometimes polished smooth by years of grinding action inside a dinosaur's digestive system. The combination of gastroliths, fermentation, and the sheer size of their digestive systems allowed herbivorous dinosaurs to thrive on plant material that would seem impossibly poor in nutrition by modern standards. The limbs and feet of giant dinosaurs were equally specialized for supporting massive weight. Sauropod legs were columnar, like those of elephants, but even more extreme. They walked on their toes, but behind the toes was a thick pad of connective tissue that helped distribute weight and absorb shock. Their feet were remarkably small relative to their body size, but this concentration of weight actually helped them walk on soft ground by penetrating the surface layer to reach firmer substrate beneath. Fossilized trackways show that despite their size, sauropods could move effectively across a variety of terrains, from firm ground to soft mud. The tail was another crucial component of the sauropod body plan. Far from being merely a counterbalance to the neck, the tail was a multifunctional organ that played vital roles in locomotion, defense, and possibly communication. The tails of many sauropods were extraordinarily long, with some species having tails that stretched over 50 feet. These were not passive structures, but were equipped with powerful muscles
that could move them with surprising speed and force. Computer modeling has suggested that the tips of some sauropod tails could have been cracked like whips, possibly creating sonic booms that could be heard for miles. The growth patterns of dinosaurs were unlike anything seen in modern reptiles. While crocodiles and lizards grow slowly throughout their lives, and mammals and birds grow quickly to adult size and then stop, dinosaurs exhibited a unique pattern. They grew at rates approaching those of modern birds and mammals during their youth, then slowed but continued growing throughout their lives. This pattern allowed them to reach sexual maturity while still relatively small and vulnerable, ensuring reproduction even if they didn't survive to full adult size, while also allowing the survivors to continue growing to truly gigantic proportions. Bone histology, the study of bone tissue structure, has revealed remarkable details about dinosaur growth. By examining thin sections of dinosaur bones under microscopes, scientists can see growth rings similar to those in trees, indicating periods of slower and faster growth. These studies show that even the largest sauropods reached their massive size in just a few decades, growing at rates that would seem impossible for reptiles. A baby sauropod weighing just a few pounds at hatching could reach several tons within its first decade of life, a growth rate that required sophisticated physiological systems to support. The metabolism of giant dinosaurs has been a subject of intense debate. Were they warm-blooded, like birds and mammals? Cold-blooded, like modern reptiles? Or something in between? The evidence increasingly points to dinosaurs having a unique metabolic strategy, sometimes called mesothermy or gigantothermy. Large dinosaurs could maintain relatively constant body temperatures simply through their size, as their massive bodies would heat and cool very slowly. Combined with metabolic rates higher than modern reptiles, but possibly lower than similar-sized mammals, this would have allowed them to remain active while not requiring the enormous food intake that a fully warm-blooded giant would need. The social structures that supported giant dinosaur populations were likely complex and sophisticated. Fossil evidence including trackways, nesting sites, and bone beds suggests that many dinosaurs lived in herds, sometimes numbering in the hundreds or thousands. For giants, social living would have provided protection for young, improved foraging efficiency, and better defense against predators. The logistics of supporting herds of multi-ton animals would have required extensive home ranges and possibly seasonal migrations to follow food resources. The reproductive strategies of giant dinosaurs present yet another set of extraordinary adaptations. How does an animal weighing 70 tons or more reproduce without crushing its mate or its eggs? Sauropods laid relatively small eggs, rarely larger than a football, even for the largest species. This might seem counterintuitive, but there are good reasons for this size limitation. Eggshells must be thin enough to allow gas exchange for the developing embryo, but thick enough to support the weight of the egg contents. There's a physical limit to how large an egg can be before these requirements become incompatible. This meant that baby dinosaurs were tiny compared to their parents, perhaps weighing less than 1/10,000th of adult weight. This size disparity is greater than for any modern animal, and would have meant that juveniles occupied completely different ecological niches than adults. essentially being different animals at different life stages.
Young sauropods might have lived in forests, feeding on different plants, and facing different predators than their parents who browsed in open woodlands. Only after years of growth would they join adult herds, having survived a gauntlet of predation and environmental challenges. The sensory systems of giant dinosaurs were adapted to their unique lifestyles. Despite having relatively small heads, and therefore small brains compared to body size, dinosaurs possessed sophisticated sensory capabilities. Their eyes were often large and well-developed, positioned to give them good fields of view to detect predators or locate food. Their inner ears show adaptations for detecting low-frequency sounds that would have traveled long distances, possibly allowing herds to communicate over miles of distance. Some scientists have suggested that sauropods could have produced infrasonic calls, below the range of human hearing, similar to modern elephants. The living world of the Titans. The sun rises over a late Jurassic landscape 150 million years ago, painting the sky in hues that no human eye will witness for eons to come. The air is thick with moisture and oxygen, carrying the scent of unfamiliar vegetation and the distant calls of creatures that defy modern imagination. This is Morrison Formation territory, what will one day become the American West, but for now, it is a vast river plain dotted with forests of conifers and ferns, crossed by meandering streams that periodically flood to create rich wetlands. And everywhere, absolutely everywhere, there are dinosaurs. A herd of Diplodocus emerges from the morning mist, their 70-foot bodies moving with unexpected grace across the floodplain. These are not sluggish, tail-dragging monsters of old museum displays, but dynamic, active animals whose every movement speaks of power and purpose. Their necks sweep in elegant arcs as they feed, stripping fronds from tree ferns with their pencil-like teeth. The sound of their feeding is constant. The crack of breaking branches, the rustle of disturbed foliage, and occasionally a deep, rumbling vocalization that seems to come from the earth itself. Each member of this herd is a walking ecosystem. Clouds of insects follow them, some feeding on their blood, others on their dung, still others simply using the giants as mobile perches. Small pterosaurs dart between their legs, snatching up insects disturbed by their movement. Where they have passed, the vegetation is transformed. Tall trees stripped of their lower branches, undergrowth trampled into paths that smaller dinosaurs will follow. Their dung, deposited in massive piles, immediately becomes a resource that will support hundreds of species, from dung beetles to small mammals to specialized plants that grow nowhere else. The social dynamics of the herd are complex and constantly shifting. The largest adults, potentially century-old matriarchs and patriarchs, maintain a loose leadership, choosing feeding grounds and directing movement. Younger adults form subgroups based on size and possibly familial relationships. Juveniles, still measuring only 20 or 30 feet long, stay close to the herd's center, protected from the predators that constantly shadow the group. The smallest young, recent hatchlings no bigger than a house cat, are nowhere to be seen. They inhabit a completely different world, hiding in dense undergrowth, living more like modern ground birds than like their massive parents. The herd's movement is not random, but follows ancient patterns encoded in their genes and reinforced by tradition passed from generation to generation. They know where the best feeding grounds are in each season, where to find water during the dry months,
where the ground is firm enough to support their weight during the rains.
Their migration routes are highways that have been used for millions of years, worn so deep that they reshape the landscape itself, creating valleys and directing water flow. As the day warms, the herd moves toward water. A river, broad and slow-moving, provides not just drinking water but relief from the heat and parasites. The diplodocids wade in carefully, their massive weight requiring them to test each step. The water barely reaches their bellies, but they lower their necks to drink, each adult consuming hundreds of gallons in a single session. Some individuals go deeper, possibly to feed on aquatic plants, their long necks allowing them to browse underwater while keeping their nostrils above the surface. But they are not alone at the river. A group of Stegosaurus has already claimed a section of the bank, their distinctive rows of plates catching the morning sun. These are members of a different dynasty of giants, the thyreophorans, or armored dinosaurs, which have evolved a completely different strategy for dealing with predation. Where sauropods relied on size and herding, stegosaurs developed elaborate defensive weaponry. Their plates, long thought to be armor, are now understood to have been display structures, possibly used for species recognition, sexual selection, and thermoregulation. But their tail spikes, the thagomizer, are unambiguously weapons, capable of inflicting fatal wounds on even the largest predators. The stegosaurs are nervous around the sauropods, not from fear of attack, but from concern about being accidentally trampled. They maintain their distance, feeding on different plants, preferring low-growing ferns and cycads that they can reach with their relatively short necks. Their feeding style is entirely different from the sauropods, using their beaked mouths to carefully select the most nutritious plant parts, then processing them with their small but numerous cheek teeth. The riverside is a nexus of activity. Smaller ornithopod dinosaurs dart between the giant's legs, feeding on plants disturbed by the larger herbivores' movement. These are the ancestors of the duck-billed dinosaurs that will dominate later periods. But for now, they are modest-sized bipedal runners that rely on speed and agility for survival. They maintain constant vigilance, their large eyes scanning for danger, ready to sprint at the slightest sign of threat. And threats are always present. From a grove of conifers, a pair of eyes watches the herbivore congregation with predatory intensity. Allosaurus, the lion of the Jurassic, is planning its approach. At 30 feet long and weighing 2 tons, it might seem small compared to the sauropods, but it is perfectly designed for killing. Its skull is built for delivering powerful bites. Its teeth are serrated blades that can slice through hide and muscle. And its arms, unlike those of later tyrannosaurs, are powerful weapons equipped with massive claws. But Allosaurus is not a mindless killing machine. It is a calculating predator that understands risk and reward. Adult sauropods are essentially invulnerable to attack, their size and defensive capabilities making them too dangerous even for a pack of allosaurs. But the herd has weaknesses: the young, the old, the sick, the isolated. The predator waits, watching for opportunity, possibly communicating with others of its kind through low-frequency calls that the herbivores cannot detect over their own vocalizations and movement. The relationship between predator and prey in this ancient world was a complex dance that shaped both groups' evolution. Every defensive adaptation in herbivores drove the evolution of new predatory strategies, which in turn selected for better defenses. This arms race produced some of the most remarkable animals ever to exist, from the massive, long-necked sauropods
to the perfectly engineered killing machines like Allosaurus, and later, even more formidable predators.
As the day progresses, the temperature rises. The Jurassic climate is warm and humid, with no polar ice caps and sea levels much higher than today. The greenhouse conditions that prevail support lush plant growth, but also create challenges for large animals trying to dissipate heat. The sauropods deal with this in various ways. Some seek shade under the scattered conifers, though few trees can completely shade an animal 70 feet long. Others remain in the water, using evaporative cooling. Their long necks and tails, with their large surface area relative to volume, act as radiators, helping to dump excess heat. The afternoon brings a different rhythm to the dinosaur community. Many of the large herbivores become less active, conserving energy during the hottest part of the day. But this lull in large herbivore activity creates opportunities for others. Smaller dinosaurs that might be vulnerable when the giants are active now emerge to feed. Tiny Compsognathus, no bigger than a chicken, hunts insects and small vertebrates in the undergrowth. These diminutive theropods are reminders that not all dinosaurs were giants. They occupied every size niche from the gigantic to the genuinely small. In the forest canopy, the first birds are beginning to make their appearance. Archaeopteryx, with its mixture of reptilian and avian features, glides between trees on feathered wings. These early birds are still rare, overshadowed by the pterosaurs that dominate the skies. Massive pteranodon soars overhead on wings spanning 20 feet, scanning the river for fish. These flying reptiles, though not dinosaurs themselves, are part of the same archosaur radiation that produced both dinosaurs and crocodiles. The pterosaur presence adds another dimension to the ecosystem. They are not just predators, but also scavengers, seed dispersers, and prey for other animals. Their rookeries, located on cliff faces and tall trees, are centers of intense activity during breeding season, with thousands of individuals gathering to mate and raise young. The sound of a pterosaur colony, a cacophony of screams, clicks, and wing beats, can be heard for miles. As afternoon gives way to evening, the dinosaur community prepares for night. The notion that dinosaurs were sluggish, cold-blooded creatures that became inactive at night has been thoroughly debunked. Many species were likely cathemeral, active both day and night, while others may have been primarily nocturnal. The large eyes of some species suggest good night vision, while others show adaptations for low-light hearing and smell. Night in the Jurassic brings out a different cast of characters. Small mammals, which have lived in the shadows of dinosaurs for millions of years, emerge from their burrows and tree hollows. These are not the dominant creatures they will become after the extinction, but they are successful in their own right, occupying niches that dinosaurs cannot or do not exploit. They feed on insects, seeds, and occasionally dinosaur eggs, always alert for the small theropod dinosaurs that hunt them. The darkness also provides cover for dinosaur behaviors that are too dangerous during the day. Young sauropods, living separately from adults, may move between hiding spots. Predators that hunt cooperatively may coordinate attacks on sleeping prey. Mating displays and territorial battles, too risky when visibility is good and escape routes clear, may take place under cover of darkness. The sounds of the Jurassic night would be alien to modern ears. The deep, infrasonic calls of sauropods communicating across miles of distance, the screams of hunting theropods, the croaking and chirping of primitive frogs and insects, the wing beats of pterosaurs and early birds, all combined to create a soundscape that spoke of a world ruled by reptiles, where mammals were marginal
and birds were just beginning their evolutionary journey. Water plays a central role in the lives of Jurassic giants. Rivers and lakes are not just sources of drinking water, but highways for movement, refuges from predators, and rich feeding grounds. Some dinosaurs, like the massive Camarasaurus, spend significant time in water, using buoyancy to support their weight and accessing aquatic plants. Others, like the predatory Ceratosaurus, hunt in shallow water, using their powerful tails for propulsion and their grasping claws to catch fish and other aquatic prey. The wetlands that border rivers and lakes are particularly rich ecosystems. Here, the boundaries between terrestrial and aquatic blur. Lungfish burrow in mud that alternates between underwater and exposed with the seasons. Crocodilians, the only archosaur group besides dinosaurs to survive to the present, patrol the shallows. These ancient predators have already perfected a body plan so successful that they will remain essentially unchanged for the next 150 million years. Climate drives everything in this ancient world. The Jurassic period experiences climate changes on various scales, from daily weather patterns to multi-million-year cycles driven by volcanic activity and continental drift. The dinosaurs must adapt to these changes or perish. During dry periods, watering holes become battlegrounds where predator and prey are forced into close proximity. During wet periods, floods reshape the landscape, creating new opportunities but also new challenges. The plants that sustain this world of giants are not the flowering plants we know today, but more ancient lineages. Conifers dominate the forests, some growing to enormous sizes that match their dinosaur browsers. Ferns carpet the understory and colonize disturbed ground.
Cycads, looking like a cross between palms and ferns, provide nutritious seeds and fronds. Ginkgos, virtually unchanged to this day, drop their distinctive fan-shaped leaves into fossil deposits. These plants have their own evolutionary relationships with dinosaurs, developing defenses against herbivory and, in some cases, possibly forming mutualistic relationships where dinosaurs disperse seeds in exchange for nutrition. The fossil record provides us snapshots of dramatic moments in these ancient ecosystems. Bone beds where hundreds of individuals of the same species died together speak of disasters that struck herds, droughts that concentrated animals around failing water sources, floods that caught migrating groups, volcanic eruptions that poisoned entire regions. Other fossils preserve more intimate moments. A theropod brooding its nest like a modern bird. Sauropod trackways showing adults surrounding juveniles in protective formation. The remains of a predator and prey locked in eternal combat. The dynasty of flesh and bone. The predators of the Mesozoic era represented evolution's most ambitious experiments in creating the perfect killing machine. For 150 million years, theropod dinosaurs refined the art of predation, producing a succession of increasingly sophisticated hunters that pushed the boundaries of what was possible for terrestrial carnivores. From the modest-sized Coelophysis of the Triassic to the massive Tyrannosaurus rex of the late Cretaceous, these creatures embodied power, speed, and lethality on a scale never seen before or since. To understand the predatory dinosaurs, we must first appreciate the revolutionary body plan they inherited and perfected. All theropods were bipedal, standing and walking on their hind legs, with their bodies balanced horizontally. Tail extended behind as a counterweight. This posture, so different from the quadrupedal stance of most large predatory mammals, offered unique advantages. It freed the forelimbs to become specialized weapons or tools,
concentrated the animal's weight over its hips for maximum running efficiency, and elevated the head for superior vision and strike range. The story of theropod evolution is one of continuous innovation and diversification. In the late Triassic, when dinosaurs were just beginning their rise to dominance, early theropods like Herrerasaurus were already formidable predators. At 20 feet long, with powerful hind limbs and grasping hands, they established the basic theropod blueprint that would be refined over the next 150 million years. These early predators had to compete with other archosaurs, particularly the Rawasuchians, crocodile-line predators that initially dominated terrestrial ecosystems. But theropods had advantages that would ultimately prove decisive: superior respiratory efficiency, more upright posture, and possibly higher metabolic rates. As we enter the Jurassic period, theropod diversity explodes. The Dilophosaurids, made famous though grossly misrepresented by popular media, were actually elegant predators with distinctive twin crests on their skulls. These crests were likely display structures, possibly brightly colored in life, used for species recognition and sexual selection. This reminds us that predatory dinosaurs were not just killing machines, but complex animals with social behaviors and communication methods we are only beginning to understand. The Middle Jurassic saw the rise of the megalosauroids, including Megalosaurus itself, the first dinosaur to be scientifically described. These were robust predators with powerful jaws and strong arms, establishing a pattern of increasing size that would characterize large theropod evolution. But size increase wasn't linear or universal. Throughout the Mesozoic, small theropods continued to thrive alongside their giant cousins, occupying different ecological niches and hunting different prey.
The late Jurassic represents perhaps the golden age of theropod diversity in terms of body forms and hunting strategies. This period gave us Allosaurus, arguably the most successful large predator of its time. Allosaurus was not the largest theropod of its era, but it was perhaps the most versatile. Its remains are found in enormous numbers in places like the Cleveland Lloyd Dinosaur Quarry, suggesting it was a common and successful predator. With powerful arms ending in massive claws, a mouth full of serrated teeth, and evidence of potential pack-hunting behavior, Allosaurus was perfectly adapted to tackle the diverse prey of its time. But Allosaurus had competition. Ceratosaurus, with its distinctive nasal horn and more flexible tail, occupied a slightly different niche, possibly specializing in aquatic prey. Torvosaurus, larger and more robust than Allosaurus, may have been the apex predator in some ecosystems. The diversity of large predators in the late Jurassic suggests that prey was abundant and varied enough to support multiple species of multi-ton carnivores. The arms race between predator and prey drove remarkable innovations on both sides. As herbivorous dinosaurs grew larger and developed better defenses, predators evolved new strategies to overcome them. Some, like the Spinosaurids, developed elongated snouts and conical teeth for catching fish, opening up new food sources. Others, like the Abelisaurids, reduced their arms to virtual nubs while developing incredibly powerful neck muscles and reinforced skulls, possibly for delivering bone-crushing bites
or even using their heads as battering rams. The Cretaceous period brought the age of giant theropods to its zenith. The Carcharodontosaurids, named for their shark-like teeth, produced some of the largest land predators ever known.
Giganotosaurus from South America, Carcharodontosaurus from Africa, and Acrocanthosaurus from North America all exceeded 40 feet in length and possessed skulls over 5 feet long. These were predators capable of tackling even adult sauropods, their blade-like teeth perfectly designed for slicing through thick hide and muscle. But perhaps the most extraordinary predatory dinosaur of the mid-Cretaceous was Spinosaurus. Recent discoveries have revolutionized our understanding of this creature, revealing it to be semi-aquatic, with a paddle-like tail, dense bones for buoyancy control, and possibly webbed feet. At potentially 50 feet long, it was perhaps the longest theropod ever, dividing its time between terrestrial and aquatic hunting. The evolution of such a specialized predator speaks to the incredible diversity of ecological niches available during the age of dinosaurs. The late Cretaceous brought us the tyrannosaurs, culminating in the most famous dinosaur of all, Tyrannosaurus rex. But T-Rex was not simply a larger version of earlier predators. It represented a fundamentally different approach to predation. Its arms, famously small, were actually incredibly powerful for their size, capable of lifting hundreds of pounds. But the real weapons were its jaws. With a bite force estimated at over 12,000 pounds per square inch, T-Rex could literally crush the bones of its prey, accessing nutritious marrow that other predators couldn't reach. The skull of Tyrannosaurus rex was a masterpiece of biological engineering. Unlike the relatively flat skulls of earlier large theropods, T-Rex had a broad, deep skull that could withstand tremendous forces. Its teeth were not thin blades but robust spikes, described as lethal bananas, designed to punch through armor and bone. The front teeth were D-shaped in cross-section, perfect for gripping, while the side teeth were more blade-like for slicing. This heterodont dentition, with different tooth shapes for different functions, was surprisingly sophisticated. But T-Rex was more than just powerful jaws on legs. Recent research has revealed surprising aspects of its biology. Its brain was large for a dinosaur, with well-developed olfactory bulbs, suggesting an excellent sense of smell, possibly capable of detecting carrion from miles away. Its eyes faced forward, providing binocular vision and depth perception, crucial for a predator. Growth studies show that T-Rex grew astoundingly fast during its teenage years, gaining over 1,700 pounds per year during its growth spurt. The hunting strategies of large theropods have been debated for decades. Were they active predators, scavengers, or both? The answer, almost certainly, is both. As with most modern carnivores, no predator passes up a free meal, and no scavenger refuses to hunt when opportunity presents itself. But the anatomy of these creatures strongly suggests they were capable predators. Their legs were built for sustained walking and possibly brief bursts of speed. Their senses were acute. Their weapons were formidable. Evidence for pack hunting in some theropods is tantalizing, but controversial. Trackways showing multiple individuals of the same species moving in the same direction suggest group movement.
Bone beds with multiple individuals of species like Albertosaurus suggest social behavior. Injuries on prey animals that appear to come from multiple angles hint at coordinated attacks. If large theropods did hunt in groups, even occasionally, they would have been virtually unstoppable, capable of bringing down the largest prey animals that ever lived. The medium-sized theropods of the Mesozoic were no less remarkable than their giant cousins. The dromaeosaurids, or raptor dinosaurs, were pound for pound perhaps the most formidable predators of all. Velociraptor, Deinonychus, and their kin possessed a combination of intelligence, agility, and weaponry that made them incredibly effective hunters. Their distinctive sickle-shaped toe claws were held off the ground while walking, but could be deployed in attacks, possibly to pin prey while the predator used its teeth and hand claws to dispatch it. But the most remarkable feature of dromaeosaurids and many other small to medium theropods was their feathers. Yes, feathers. The discovery that many theropod dinosaurs had feathers has revolutionized our understanding of these creatures. Initially evolved perhaps for insulation or display, feathers became increasingly elaborate in some lineages. By the late Jurassic, some small theropods had developed true flight feathers, and by the Cretaceous, the line between dinosaurs and birds had become completely blurred. The smallest theropods occupied ecological niches similar to modern birds and small mammals. Compsognathus, no larger than a chicken, hunted insects and small vertebrates. Microraptor, with wings on both its arms and legs, glided between trees in early Cretaceous forests. These tiny predators remind us that the age of dinosaurs was not just about giants. It was about the complete domination of terrestrial ecosystems by dinosaurs of all sizes. The sensory world of predatory dinosaurs was likely far richer than we once imagined. Studies of theropod brains, based on CT scans of brain cases, reveal well-developed sensory regions. Many had excellent vision, with some species possibly capable of seeing ultraviolet light. Their sense of smell ranged from modest in some species to extraordinarily acute in others. Some may have had pressure-sensitive scales on their snouts, similar to modern crocodilians, allowing them to sense prey in murky water or dense vegetation. Communication among theropods likely involved a variety of methods. Visual displays using crests, frills, or feathers were probably common.
Vocalizations, from roars to more bird-like calls, would have filled the Mesozoic soundscape. Some species may have used infrasound, below the range of human hearing, to communicate over long distances. Chemical communication through scent marking is also possible, particularly for territorial species. The reproductive behavior of theropods shows surprising sophistication. Fossil evidence reveals that many species built nests and brooded their eggs, sitting on them like modern birds. Some nests show evidence of careful construction, with eggs arranged in specific patterns and covered with vegetation for insulation. Parental care probably extended beyond hatching, with adults possibly feeding and protecting young for extended periods. This level of parental investment suggests complex social behaviors and possibly extended family groups. Theropod predators also showed remarkable adaptability to changing environments and prey availability. During the Cretaceous, as flowering plants revolutionized terrestrial ecosystems and new types of herbivorous dinosaurs evolved, predators adapted accordingly. The evolution of horned ceratopsians and armored ankylosaurs drove the evolution of more powerful jaws and specialized hunting strategies.
The rise of hadrosaurs, with their superior senses and potential for high-speed running, selected for faster, more agile predators. The injuries preserved in theropod fossils tell stories of violent lives. Broken and healed bones speak of battles with prey and rivals. Tooth marks on bones show where individuals fed and fought. Some specimens show evidence of infections, cancers, and other diseases that these animals survived, at least temporarily. One famous Tyrannosaurus specimen, Sue, shows numerous healed injuries, including broken ribs, damaged vertebrae, and a torn tendon in the right arm, testament to a long and violent life. The extinction patterns of theropods throughout the Mesozoic are instructive.
Multiple extinction events affected different groups at different times, yet theropods as a whole always recovered and diversified anew. The Triassic-Jurassic extinction eliminated many early theropod lineages, but opened opportunities for new ones. The Jurassic-Cretaceous boundary saw turnover in dominant predator groups. Regional extinctions caused by sea level changes or climate shifts created opportunities for immigrant species or drove local evolution. The Eden of Giants, a world built for titans. The world that nurtured dinosaur gigantism was fundamentally different from our own, a planetary greenhouse where the very chemistry of air and soil, the configuration of continents, and the rhythms of climate all conspired to create conditions perfect for the evolution of giants. To understand how dinosaurs grew so large, we must first understand the world they inhabited, a Earth so transformed from today's that it might as well have been an alien planet. During the Mesozoic era, the supercontinent Pangaea slowly fractured and drifted apart, fundamentally reshaping global climate patterns and creating new evolutionary laboratories on isolated land masses. In the Triassic, when dinosaurs first appeared, all of Earth's land was connected in one massive continent stretching from pole to pole. This created extreme climate conditions, scorching deserts in the interior, far from any moderating ocean influence, and narrow bands of more hospitable climate along the coasts. The first dinosaurs evolved in this challenging world, perhaps giving them the adaptability that would serve them well in the very different conditions to come. As Pangaea began to break apart during the Jurassic, rifts opened that would become new oceans. The Atlantic began as a narrow seaway, gradually widening as the Americas pulled away from Europe and Africa. This continental breakup had profound effects on global climate. New ocean currents could now flow between the separating continents, distributing heat more evenly around the globe. Humid maritime air could penetrate deeper into continental interiors. The result was a warmer, wetter world, with less extreme temperature variations, perfect for supporting lush vegetation and the giants that fed upon it. The atmosphere itself was different during much of the Mesozoic. Oxygen levels fluctuated significantly throughout the era, at times reaching perhaps 30% or more compared to today's 21%. This oxygen-rich atmosphere would have made breathing more efficient, particularly important for giant animals with high metabolic demands. The extra oxygen would have supported more active lifestyles, faster growth rates, and larger body sizes. Flying creatures particularly benefited. The denser atmosphere made it easier for large pterosaurs to get airborne and stay aloft. Carbon dioxide levels were also dramatically higher, perhaps 4 to 8 times present-day concentrations. This created a powerful greenhouse effect, keeping global temperatures warm even at high latitudes. There were no permanent ice caps during most of the Mesozoic. Forests grew in Antarctica and the Arctic. Crocodilians lived above the Arctic Circle. This warm global climate meant more evaporation from the oceans, more precipitation, and more plant growth to fuel herbivorous dinosaurs.
The plant life that carpeted this greenhouse world was unlike anything in modern ecosystems. There were no grasses. Grasslands as we know them didn't exist. There were no flowers for most of the dinosaur age. Flowering plants only appeared in the early Cretaceous and didn't dominate until near the end of the period. Instead, the landscape was covered with conifers, ferns, cycads, ginkgos, and other ancient plant lineages. Many of these plants were less nutritious than modern flowering plants, requiring herbivores to consume vast quantities to meet their energy needs.
This actually helps explain dinosaur gigantism. In a world where food quality was low but quantity was high, being large enough to process huge volumes of plant material became a winning strategy. A large gut could house the extensive fermentation chambers needed to break down tough plant fibers. A long neck could access food over a wide area without the energy cost of moving the entire body. Being large also meant having a lower metabolic rate per unit of body mass, making it easier to survive on low-quality food. The forests of the Jurassic were dominated by conifers that grew to enormous sizes. Some redwood ancestors reached heights of over 300 feet, creating cathedral-like forests with multiple canopy layers. These forests were not silent, empty places, but thrummed with life. Insects had already diversified into myriad forms, from giant dragonflies with 2-foot wingspans to tiny parasites that plagued dinosaur skin. The sound of buzzing, chirping, and clicking would have been constant, punctuated by the calls of pterosaurs and the movements of dinosaurs. In the understory, ferns created dense thickets that provided cover for small animals and juvenile dinosaurs. Tree ferns grew to heights of 40 feet or more, their fronds creating umbrella-like canopies that shaded the forest floor. These ferns were not just background vegetation, but important food sources for many dinosaurs. Their relatively high nutrient content compared to conifer needles made them preferred browse for many herbivores. Cycads, often called living fossils because some species survive today virtually unchanged, were particularly important in Mesozoic ecosystems. These palm-like plants produced large, nutritious seeds that were probably dispersed by dinosaurs. Some cycads may have formed mutualistic relationships with specific dinosaur species, evolving together over millions of years. The dinosaurs got nutrition, the plants got their seeds spread over wide areas, often with a helping of fertilizer. Water shaped the Mesozoic world in ways both obvious and subtle. Sea levels were generally much higher than today, with shallow seas covering large areas of what is now dry land. The western interior seaway split North America in two for much of the late Cretaceous. These shallow seas moderated climate, provided moisture for precipitation, and created barriers that isolated populations and drove speciation. Rivers in the Mesozoic were highways of life. Many of the best dinosaur fossil sites are ancient river deposits, where flooding periodically buried carcasses in sediment. These rivers were not just transportation routes and water sources, but rich ecosystems in their own right. Gallery forests along riverbanks supported different plant communities than surrounding areas. Seasonal floods created temporary wetlands that exploded with life, supporting breeding populations of amphibians, insects, and small dinosaurs. The monsoon systems that dominated many Mesozoic climates created strongly seasonal environments. During the wet season, rain could be torrential,
turning dry riverbeds into raging torrents and transforming semi-deserts into temporary wetlands. Plant growth would explode, and herbivorous dinosaurs would feast and breed. During the dry season, water became scarce, vegetation withered, and animals concentrated around permanent water sources. These seasonal rhythms drove migrations, controlled breeding cycles, and shaped dinosaur evolution. Volcanic activity was a constant feature of the Mesozoic world. The breakup of Pangaea was accompanied by massive volcanic eruptions that sometimes covered millions of square miles with lava flows. These eruptions periodically caused regional or even global climate disruptions, leading to extinctions and subsequent evolutionary radiations.
But volcanism also enriched soils with minerals, supporting lush plant growth that fed herbivorous dinosaurs. Volcanic highlands created diverse habitats and climate zones, increasing biodiversity. The oceans of the Mesozoic were as alien as the land. Marine reptiles, though not dinosaurs themselves, achieved sizes rivaling the largest land animals. Plesiosaurs with necks longer than their bodies hunted fish in shallow seas. Mosasaurs, essentially giant marine lizards, grew to 50 feet or more and were apex predators of late Cretaceous oceans. Ichthyosaurs, dolphin-shaped reptiles, evolved sizes ranging from a few feet to over 60 feet long. These marine ecosystems were incredibly productive, supporting not just large reptiles, but vast populations of fish, ammonites, and other invertebrates. Nutrients from terrestrial runoff, combined with warm temperatures and high sea levels, created perfect conditions for marine productivity. This productivity extended to coastal areas where dinosaurs could exploit marine resources. Some theropods specialized in fishing, while some sauropods may have fed on seaweed and coastal vegetation. The polar regions of the Mesozoic, while much warmer than today, still experienced extreme seasonal light variations. During polar summers, continuous daylight supported explosive plant growth. During polar winters, months of darkness created challenging conditions that dinosaurs had to either endure or escape through migration. Fossils from Alaska and Antarctica show that dinosaurs successfully colonized these polar regions, developing adaptations for dealing with months of darkness and cooler temperatures. These polar dinosaur communities challenge our understanding of dinosaur physiology.
How did large herbivores survive months when photosynthesis shut down? Did they migrate thousands of miles to escape polar winters? Did they have physiological adaptations for surviving on stored body fat? Could they enter states of torpor? The presence of diverse dinosaur fossils, including juveniles, in polar regions suggests that at least some species were year-round residents, implying remarkable adaptations we're only beginning to understand. The evolution of flowering plants in the Cretaceous revolutionized terrestrial ecosystems. These angiosperms brought new possibilities: more nutritious leaves and seeds, faster growth rates, and new ecological relationships with pollinators and seed dispersers. Dinosaurs almost certainly played roles in early angiosperm evolution, perhaps dispersing seeds and creating disturbed habitats where these pioneering plants could establish themselves. The rise of flowering plants coincided with changes in herbivorous dinosaur communities. Hadrosaurs evolved sophisticated chewing mechanisms to process tougher angiosperm leaves. Ceratopsians developed powerful beaks and shearing teeth for cutting through fibrous plant material. The diversification of late Cretaceous herbivores may have been driven in part by the new ecological opportunities presented by flowering plants. Climate change was a constant throughout the Mesozoic, operating on multiple timescales. Short-term variations, like annual seasons, shaped dinosaur behavior and life cycles. Medium-term changes, operating over thousands to millions of years, drove evolution and extinction. Long-term trends, like the gradual cooling during the late Cretaceous, fundamentally altered ecosystems and the dinosaurs that inhabited them. The Cretaceous thermal maximum, about 90 million years ago, represented peak greenhouse conditions during the age of dinosaurs. Global temperatures may have been 10 degrees Celsius or more warmer than today.
Tropical conditions extended to latitudes of 45 degrees or higher. This extreme warmth supported dinosaur gigantism, but may also have created stresses, particularly in already hot equatorial regions, where temperatures could have approached the thermal limits for large animals. The interconnectedness of Mesozoic ecosystems is revealed by trace fossils and geological evidence. Dinosaur trackways show migration routes that connected distant regions. Fossilized stomach contents reveal what dinosaurs ate. Coprolites, fossilized dung, preserve information about diet and the organisms that recycled nutrients. Gastroliths, stones swallowed to aid digestion, tell us about feeding strategies and sometimes about long-distance movement when the stones are found far from their geological origin. The soils of the Mesozoic were different from modern soils, largely because there were no grasses to form thick root mats and stabilize sediments. Erosion rates were likely higher, especially in areas heavily impacted by dinosaur herds. But dinosaurs also created soils through their activities. Vast quantities of dung fertilized the landscape. Trampling and wallowing created depressions that collected water and sediment. Death and decay returned nutrients to ecosystems, supporting plant growth that in turn fed more dinosaurs. Fire played a different role in Mesozoic ecosystems than in modern ones. Without grasses to carry ground fires, and with generally wetter conditions, large-scale wildfires may have been less common. But evidence of charcoal in some deposits shows that fires did occur, possibly playing important ecological roles in clearing vegetation and recycling nutrients. Some plants may have evolved adaptations to survive or even benefit from periodic fires, as many modern plants do. The Mesozoic world was one of biological superlatives. The largest land animals ever, the biggest flying creatures ever, some of the most extensive forests, productive oceans, and extreme climates in Earth's history. This was not a static world, but one of constant change, where continents moved, climates shifted, and life continuously evolved new forms and strategies. It was a world that nurtured giants for 150 million years, far longer than the entire age of mammals to date. Understanding this lost world helps us appreciate not just what was lost when the dinosaurs died, but what extraordinary conditions are required to support life on such a magnificent scale. The science of growing gigantic. The journey from a hatchling no larger than a robin to an adult weighing as much as a herd of elephants represents one of the most extraordinary growth trajectories in the history of life.
How dinosaurs achieved such massive size, growing faster than any modern reptile yet living longer than most mammals, required a unique combination of physiological innovations that scientists are still working to fully understand. The mechanics of this growth, revealed through microscopic analysis of fossilized bones, chemical signatures locked in ancient teeth, and computer models of metabolic processes, tell a story of biological engineering pushed to its absolute limits. When a sauropod egg cracked open in a Jurassic nest, the tiny creature that emerged faced almost insurmountable odds. Weighing perhaps less than a pound, it would need to increase its mass by a factor of 50,000 or more to reach adult size. To put this in perspective, if human babies grew at similar rates relative to their birth weight, adults would weigh over 150,000 pounds. This growth wasn't slow and steady like modern reptiles, which grow continuously throughout their lives but at ever-decreasing rates. Nor was it like mammals, which grow rapidly to adult size and then stop. Dinosaurs had evolved a unique growth strategy that combined the best of both approaches.
The secret to understanding dinosaur growth lies hidden in their bones, specifically in the microscopic structure preserved in fossilized bone tissue. When scientists cut thin sections of dinosaur bones and examine them under polarized light, they see patterns that tell the life story of the animal. Like trees, dinosaur bones often show growth rings, called lines of arrested growth, or lags, that mark periods when growth slowed or stopped, probably during unfavorable seasons. Between these lines, the bone tissue itself reveals how fast the animal was growing. The bone tissue of rapidly growing dinosaurs looks remarkably similar to that of modern birds and mammals. It's called fibrolamellar bone, characterized by a woven texture filled with blood vessels, indicating rapid deposition of bone tissue. This type of bone forms when growth is so fast that the body doesn't have time to lay down bone in organized layers. It's metabolically expensive to produce, but allows for growth rates that would be impossible with the slower-forming lamellar bone typical of modern reptiles. Studies of dinosaur growth rings have revealed astonishing growth rates. Large sauropods like Apatosaurus gained approximately 5,500 pounds per year during their peak growth phase. That's about 15 pounds per day, every day, for years on end. Tyrannosaurus rex, during its teenage growth spurt, packed on about 1,700 pounds per year. These growth rates are comparable to or even exceed those of modern whales, the fastest-growing animals alive today. But how did dinosaurs fuel such rapid growth? The answer involves multiple physiological innovations working in concert. First, there was their remarkable digestive system. Herbivorous dinosaurs had evolved various strategies for extracting maximum nutrition from plant material. Sauropods, with their small heads and peg-like teeth, couldn't chew their food. Instead, they relied on their enormous guts to break down plant material through fermentation. Their digestive systems were essentially massive chemical processing plants, where armies of bacteria broke down cellulose and other tough plant materials into nutrients the dinosaur could absorb. The efficiency of this fermentation process was enhanced by the long residence time of food in their digestive systems. Food might remain in a sauropod's gut for 2 weeks or more, allowing thorough breakdown of even the toughest plant materials. Gastroliths, stones swallowed to help grind food in muscular gizzards, further increased digestive efficiency. This combination of mechanical and chemical processing allowed sauropods to extract nutrients from plant material that would be essentially indigestible to many modern herbivores.
Carnivorous dinosaurs had different but equally impressive digestive adaptations. Their stomachs produced powerful acids and enzymes capable of breaking down not just meat, but also bone. Coprolites from large theropods often contain fragments of bone, indicating they could digest and extract calcium and phosphorus from their prey's skeletons. This ability to utilize every part of their prey would have been particularly important for young, rapidly growing individuals who needed vast amounts of calcium for building their own skeletons. The respiratory system of dinosaurs was crucial to supporting rapid growth. Their bird-like respiratory system, with air sacs extending throughout the body, provided several advantages. It extracted oxygen more efficiently than mammalian lungs, essential for maintaining the high metabolic rates necessary for rapid growth. The air sacs also helped remove excess heat generated by metabolism, preventing overheating during periods of intense growth. Additionally, by invading the bones, these air sacs reduced skeletal weight while maintaining strength, allowing dinosaurs to allocate more of their energy budget to growth rather than simply supporting their own weight. The cardiovascular system of dinosaurs must have been extraordinarily powerful to support such rapid growth. Growing tissues require constant supplies of oxygen and nutrients delivered by blood. The hearts of large dinosaurs were probably massive organs, possibly weighing hundreds of pounds in the largest species. Some scientists have suggested that sauropods might have had multiple hearts or heart-like organs to help pump blood through their enormous bodies, though this remains controversial. Blood pressure regulation would have been particularly challenging for long-necked dinosaurs. When a brachiosaurus raised its head to full height, its brain might be 40 feet above its heart. Generating enough pressure to pump blood that high without bursting blood vessels when the head was lowered required sophisticated cardiovascular adaptations. Modern giraffes face similar but less extreme challenges and have evolved special valves and vessel structures to manage blood pressure. Dinosaurs likely had even more advanced systems, possibly including specialized blood vessels that could constrict or dilate to regulate pressure. The endocrine system, the network of glands that produce hormones, played a crucial role in controlling dinosaur growth. Growth hormone, thyroid hormones, and insulin-like growth factors would have regulated the rate and timing of growth. The pituitary gland, the master controller of the endocrine system, was probably proportionally larger in dinosaurs than in modern reptiles, more similar to birds and mammals. This would have allowed for more precise control of growth and metabolism. Sexual maturity in dinosaurs occurred well before they reached maximum size. This is different from most modern animals, which typically reach sexual maturity at or near adult size. Studies of bone histology suggest that many dinosaurs began reproducing when they were only half their maximum size or less.
A Tyrannosaurus rex might start breeding at age 14 when it weighed only 3 tons, less than half its potential adult weight. This strategy, called indeterminate growth, allowed dinosaurs to begin reproducing relatively early in life while continuing to grow larger if they survived. This growth strategy had important evolutionary implications. It meant that dinosaurs could reproduce even if they didn't survive to full adult size, ensuring species survival even in harsh conditions. It also meant that a single species could effectively occupy multiple ecological niches at different life stages. A young T-Rex was a different animal than an adult, hunting different prey and facing different competitors and threats. The relationship between growth rate and body temperature in dinosaurs has been intensely debated.
Rapid growth typically requires a warm, stable body temperature. Modern reptiles, with their variable body temperatures, grow slowly. Birds and mammals, with their constant high body temperatures, can grow rapidly. Dinosaurs seem to have found a middle ground, possibly maintaining stable body temperatures through a combination of large size, which provides thermal inertia, and moderately elevated metabolic rates. This concept, sometimes called gigantothermy or inertial homeothermy, would have been particularly effective for large dinosaurs. A multi-ton animal heats and cools very slowly, maintaining a relatively stable internal temperature even if it doesn't produce as much metabolic heat as a similar-sized mammal. This would have allowed dinosaurs to maintain body temperatures suitable for rapid growth without the extreme food requirements of a fully warm-blooded metabolism. Bone development in dinosaurs shows sophisticated remodeling through outgrowth. As dinosaurs grew, their bones didn't simply get larger, they changed shape and internal structure to handle changing mechanical loads.
A juvenile sauropod walking on 4 legs had very different skeletal stresses than an adult weighing 50 times as much. The bones show evidence of constant remodeling, with old bone tissue being broken down and replaced with new tissue organized along lines of stress. This remodeling was particularly important in weight-bearing bones like femurs and vertebrae. Cross-sections of these bones show complex internal structures with struts and braces positioned exactly where engineering analysis predicts they would be needed. This suggests that dinosaur bones were constantly optimizing themselves for maximum strength with minimum weight, an essential adaptation for achieving gigantic size. The growth of specific body parts in dinosaurs often followed different trajectories, a phenomenon called allometric growth. The necks of sauropods, for example, grew faster than their bodies, becoming proportionally longer as the animal aged. The skulls of horned dinosaurs like Triceratops changed dramatically through growth, with horns and frills that were small or absent in juveniles becoming dominant features in adults. These changes were so extreme that juveniles and adults of the same species were sometimes initially classified as different species entirely. Understanding dinosaur growth patterns helps explain some puzzling aspects of their fossil record. The rarity of juvenile fossils for many species might be partially explained by their rapid growth. They simply didn't stay small for very long. A sauropod might spend only a year or two in size classes that modern animals occupy for much longer, reducing the probability of fossilization at those sizes. The cessation of growth in dinosaurs is less well understood than its initiation and progression. Did dinosaurs have maximum sizes genetically programmed, or did they simply grow until they died? Evidence suggests both factors were at play. Growth rates clearly slowed with age in all studied dinosaurs, but some individuals show resumed growth after periods of cessation, possibly in response to improved environmental conditions or social factors like achieving dominant status. Environmental factors profoundly influenced dinosaur growth rates. Individuals from different regions or time periods of the same species show varying growth patterns, suggesting that local conditions like food availability, temperature, and seasonality affected growth. Some dinosaurs show regular cycles of faster and slower growth corresponding to seasons, while others from more stable environments grew more consistently year-round. Disease and injury also affected growth. Many dinosaur fossils show pathologies like infections, broken bones, and cancer. These conditions often left marks in the bone, showing how growth was disrupted, and sometimes resumed after healing.
One hadrosaur fossil shows evidence of a facial tumor that affected bone growth for years, but didn't prevent the animal from reaching near adult size, testament to the resilience of dinosaurian growth mechanisms. The energetics of dinosaur growth remain contentious. Estimates of food requirements for growing dinosaurs vary widely, depending on assumptions about their metabolism. If they had mammal-like metabolisms, a growing sauropod would have needed to consume enormous quantities of food, potentially stripping entire forests. If they had more reptilian metabolisms, food requirements would have been lower, but might not have supported observed growth rates. The truth probably lies somewhere in between, with dinosaurs having evolved unique metabolic strategies that we don't see in modern animals. The sky titans and ocean dragons. While dinosaurs dominated the land, the Mesozoic era witnessed equally spectacular evolutionary experiments in the air and seas.
Pterosaurs, the flying reptiles that were cousins to dinosaurs, achieved sizes that seemed to defy the laws of physics, with wingspans reaching 40 feet or more. In the oceans, marine reptiles evolved into forms that rivaled the largest dinosaurs in size and exceeded them in predatory efficiency. These creatures weren't dinosaurs, but they were part of the same great age of reptilian dominance, pushing the boundaries of what was possible for vertebrate life in every environment on Earth. The story of pterosaurs begins in the late Triassic, around 228 million years ago, when small reptiles first took to the air on wings of skin membrane stretched between enormously elongated fourth fingers and their bodies. These early pterosaurs, like Eudomorphodon, were modest in size, with wingspans of about 3 feet, comparable to modern seagulls. But from these humble beginnings would come the largest flying animals ever to exist, creatures so massive that their ability to fly challenges our understanding of aerodynamics. The anatomy of pterosaurs was unlike anything alive today. Their wings were not like bird wings, with feathers attached to modified arms, nor like bat wings, with membrane stretched between multiple elongated fingers. Instead, pterosaur wings were supported primarily by a single, massively elongated fourth finger, with the membrane, called the patagium, stretching from this finger to the body, and possibly to the hind limbs. This created a wing that was both strong and flexible, capable of changing shape for different flight modes. The bone structure of pterosaurs was remarkably adapted for flight. Their bones were hollow, with walls sometimes thinner than a playing card, yet reinforced internally with complex struts that provided strength where needed. Some pterosaur bones were so pneumatized or filled with air spaces that they were lighter than the same volume of air when alive, achieving this through being connected to air sacs that filled them with gases lighter than atmospheric air. This extreme adaptation for weight reduction allowed pterosaurs to achieve sizes that would have been impossible with solid bones. Pterosaur diversity exploded during the Jurassic and Cretaceous periods. The long-tailed rhamphorhynchoids dominated early pterosaur evolution, using their tails as rudders for aerial maneuvering. These gave way to the short-tailed pterodactyloids, which evolved more sophisticated wing structures and achieved much larger sizes. By the late Cretaceous, pterosaurs had diversified into hundreds of species, occupying every conceivable aerial niche, from tiny insectivores to giant filter feeders to terrestrial stalkers. The discovery of Quetzalcoatlus in the 1970s revolutionized our understanding of pterosaur gigantism. With a wingspan estimated at 36 to 40 feet and standing as tall as a giraffe when on the ground,
Quetzalcoatlus northropi was essentially a flying dragon. Its skull alone was over 8 feet long, mostly consisting of a pointed, toothless beak. How such a creature could fly seemed impossible, until aerodynamic modeling showed that its extremely low weight, perhaps only 450 pounds despite its massive size, combined with powerful flight muscles and efficient wing design, made powered flight possible. But Quetzalcoatlus wasn't alone in achieving gigantic size. Hatzegopteryx from Romania had a shorter wingspan but a more robust build, with a massive skull adapted for catching and consuming relatively large prey. Aramborgiana from Jordan rivaled Quetzalcoatlus in wingspan. These Ajdarchid pterosaurs represented the pinnacle of pterosaur evolution, achieving sizes that pushed the physical limits of biological flight. The lifestyle of giant pterosaurs has been intensely debated.
Initially thought to be oceanic soarers like albatrosses, feeding on fish snatched from the water's surface, recent analysis suggests many were terrestrial stalkers. Their long necks, massive heads, and relatively small feet were poorly adapted for aquatic feeding, but perfect for walking on land and reaching down to grab prey. They may have hunted like giant storks, walking across Cretaceous plains and grabbing small dinosaurs, mammals, and other prey with their massive beaks. Smaller pterosaurs filled numerous ecological niches. Pteranodon, with its 20-foot wingspan and distinctive head crest, was probably a fish-eater, soaring over the western interior seaway. Sungaripterus had specialized teeth for crushing shellfish. Pterodostro possessed hundreds of bristle-like teeth that it used for filter feeding, like a Mesozoic flamingo. The tiny anurognathids, with wingspans of less than a foot, were probably nocturnal insectivores, the Mesozoic equivalent of bats. Pterosaur reproduction and growth present fascinating contrasts with dinosaurs. While dinosaurs appear to have been largely ground nesters, many pterosaurs probably nested on cliffs or in trees, safe from ground-based predators. Pterosaur eggs were soft-shelled, like those of modern snakes and lizards, rather than hard-shelled like dinosaur and bird eggs. Most remarkably, fossil evidence suggests that pterosaur hatchlings, called flaplings, could fly almost immediately after hatching, a strategy called superpresociality, unknown in any modern flying vertebrate. The sensory capabilities of pterosaurs were highly developed. Brain endocasts show that they had excellent vision, with large optic lobes suggesting acute eyesight necessary for aerial hunting. Their inner ears show adaptations for processing the complex spatial information required for flight.
Some species had elaborate crests that may have served multiple functions: display, species recognition, and possibly even as aerodynamic devices like rudders or air brakes. In the oceans, an equally spectacular radiation of reptiles was taking place. The marine reptiles of the Mesozoic weren't a single group, but representatives of multiple lineages that independently returned to the sea. Ichthyosaurs, plesiosaurs, mosasaurs, and marine crocodiles all evolved from different terrestrial ancestors, converging on similar solutions to the challenges of marine life. Ichthyosaurs were perhaps the most perfectly adapted marine reptiles, evolving a dolphin-like body form through convergent evolution 150 million years before dolphins existed. Early ichthyosaurs, appearing in the early Triassic, shortly after the Permian extinction, still showed their terrestrial heritage with elongated bodies and undulating swimming styles. But by the Jurassic, Ichthyosaurs like Ophthalmosaurus had evolved into perfect marine predators with streamlined bodies, powerful tails, and limbs transformed into flippers. The eyes of ichthyosaurs were extraordinary. Some species had the largest eyes relative to body size of any vertebrate, with Temnodontosaurus having eyes over 10 inches in diameter. These massive eyes, protected by rings of bone called sclerotic rings, allowed ichthyosaurs to hunt in the dim light of deep water or during night. Their large eyes also suggest they were visual predators, tracking fast-moving prey like fish and squid through the water. Ichthyosaur reproduction shows complete adaptation to marine life. Unlike sea turtles, which must return to land to lay eggs, ichthyosaurs gave birth to live young in the water. Remarkable fossils preserve females with babies inside them, and even one specimen apparently dying during childbirth, with a baby stuck in the birth canal. Baby ichthyosaurs were born tail first, like modern whales and dolphins, to prevent drowning during birth.
The size range of ichthyosaurs was enormous. Some species were no larger than a modern porpoise, while giants like Shonosaurus from the late Triassic reached lengths of over 60 feet and weights of perhaps 40 tons. These giant ichthyosaurs were probably filter feeders or slow-moving predators of large prey, occupying a niche similar to modern whales. The evolution of such massive marine predators speaks to the incredible productivity of Mesozoic oceans. Plesiosaurs took a completely different approach to marine predation. Instead of the streamlined, fast-swimming body plan of ichthyosaurs, plesiosaurs had barrel-shaped bodies with 4 large flippers and, in many species, extraordinarily long necks. The plesiosaur body plan was unique among vertebrates, with no modern analogues, making their swimming style and hunting behavior subjects of ongoing research. Long-necked plesiosaurs, or elasmosaurs, had necks that could contain over 70 vertebrae and stretch over 20 feet. These necks were not particularly flexible despite their length, and couldn't be raised swan-like above the water as often depicted. Instead, they probably used their long necks to approach prey stealthily, with their bodies far enough away to avoid detection. Their small heads and needle-like teeth were perfect for catching small, fast-moving prey like fish and squid. Short-necked plesiosaurs, or pliosaurs, were among the most formidable predators ever to exist. Kronosaurus and Pliosaurus had skulls over 8 feet long, armed with teeth the size of bananas. These were apex predators capable of taking any prey in their environment, including other marine reptiles. Bite marks on plesiosaur and ichthyosaur fossils matched the teeth of pliosaurs, direct evidence of predation. The swimming mechanism of plesiosaurs was unique. Unlike ichthyosaurs, which swam with lateral tail movements like fish, or mosasaurs, which undulated their entire bodies, plesiosaurs flew underwater using their 4 flippers. Recent studies using robotic models suggest they used a combination of rowing and underwater flight, with the front and back pairs of flippers moving in different phases to maximize efficiency. Mosasaurs were relative latecomers to the marine reptile scene, evolving from terrestrial lizards in the early Cretaceous, and rapidly diversifying to become the dominant marine predators of the late Cretaceous. These were essentially giant marine lizards, closely related to modern snakes
and monitor lizards. The largest mosasaurs, like Mosasaurus hoffmanni, reached lengths of 50 feet or more. The success of mosasaurs lay in their combination of features, inherited from their lizard ancestors, and new adaptations for marine life. They retained the flexible skull of lizards, with joints that allowed them to swallow large prey. Their bodies became streamlined, their limbs transformed into flippers, and they evolved powerful, laterally compressed tails for swimming. Some species even evolved tail flukes, visible in exceptional fossils that preserve soft tissue impressions. Mosasaur diversity was remarkable for a group that existed for only about 30 million years. Some species had blunt teeth for crushing shellfish. Others had long, slender jaws for catching fish. Globidans had rounded teeth like golf balls, specialized for crushing hard-shelled prey. Prognathodon had massive jaws and teeth capable of breaking bones. This diversity allowed mosasaurs to exploit virtually every marine predatory niche. The marine food web of the Mesozoic was complex and multi-layered. At the base were plankton and small fish, incredibly abundant in the warm, shallow seas. These supported larger fish, including early sharks and rays, as well as numerous bony fish species.
Ammonites, the spiral-shelled cephalopods related to modern nautiluses, were incredibly diverse and abundant, serving as prey for many marine reptiles. Sea turtles, appearing in the Jurassic, added another component to marine ecosystems. Competition and predation between marine reptiles created complex ecological relationships. Stomach contents and bite marks reveal who ate whom. Ichthyosaurs ate fish, squid, and smaller marine reptiles. Plesiosaurs hunted fish and ammonites. Mosasaurs ate everything, including other mosasaurs. The giant shark, Cretoxorhina, reaching 20 feet or more, competed with marine reptiles for prey and sometimes preyed on them, as evidenced by shark teeth embedded in marine reptile bones. The extinctions that affected marine reptiles throughout the Mesozoic were different from those on land. Ichthyosaurs declined dramatically in the Cretaceous, possibly outcompeted by mosasaurs or affected by changes in ocean chemistry. Plesiosaurs persisted, but with reduced diversity. The end Cretaceous extinction that eliminated the dinosaurs also wiped out mosasaurs, plesiosaurs, and pterosaurs, leaving only sea turtles and crocodilians as survivors of the great age of marine reptiles. The Flowering Revolution: How Plants Changed the World of Giants. The early Cretaceous period, roughly 125 million years ago, marked the beginning of one of the most profound revolutions in the history of life on Earth. Flowering plants, or angiosperms, appeared and began their spectacular diversification that would eventually see them dominate terrestrial ecosystems worldwide. This botanical revolution didn't just add pretty flowers to the landscape. It fundamentally transformed ecosystems, created new evolutionary opportunities and pressures for dinosaurs, and ultimately reshaped the trajectory of life on Earth. The rise of flowering plants during the age of dinosaurs was as significant as any asteroid impact. changing the rules of the game for herbivores, and, by extension, the carnivores that hunted them. Before flowering plants, the Mesozoic world was dominated by gymnosperms, conifers, cycads, ginkgos, and seed ferns. These plants had evolved successful strategies for life on land, but they were limited in many ways. Most were wind-pollinated, an inefficient process that required producing vast quantities of pollen. Their seeds were naked, exposed to the elements and predators. Growth was generally slow, and most species were woody, taking years to reach reproductive maturity. The landscape they created was one of tall conifer forests, cycad groves, and fern meadows. Successful ecosystems, but lacking the diversity and dynamism that would come with flowering plants. The origin of angiosperms remains one of the great mysteries in evolutionary biology. Charles Darwin himself called it an abominable mystery, because flowering plants seem to appear suddenly in the fossil record, already diverse and successful. Recent discoveries have pushed back their origins earlier into the Cretaceous, and possibly even the Jurassic, but their early evolution remains poorly understood. What is clear is that once they appeared, they diversified explosively, developing innovations that would give them tremendous advantages over existing plants. The key innovation of angiosperms was the flower itself, a complex structure that enclosed the reproductive organs and, crucially, attracted animal pollinators. Instead of relying on wind to carry pollen, flowering plants could recruit insects and other animals to transfer pollen directly between flowers. This was far more efficient than wind pollination and allowed plants to produce less pollen while achieving higher fertilization rates. It also created opportunities for specialization and coevolution between plants and their pollinators. Early Cretaceous flowers were small and simple, lacking the showy petals of modern flowers. But they offered something new: nectar and pollen rewards for insect visitors. Beetles, which had been around since the Permian, were probably among the first pollinators. Flies, wasps, and early bees soon joined them. This partnership between plants and insects drove rapid evolution on both sides. Plants evolved more elaborate flowers, with specific colors, shapes, and scents to attract particular pollinators. Insects evolved specialized mouthparts, sensory organs, and behaviors to better exploit floral resources. The dinosaurs initially seemed oblivious to this botanical revolution happening literally beneath their feet. The first flowering plants were small, weedy species growing in disturbed habitats, streamsides, forest gaps, areas trampled by dinosaur herds. The giant sauropods continued browsing on conifers and ferns, their digestive systems optimized for processing these ancient plants. But gradually, inevitably, the flowering plants began to impinge on the dinosaur world. By the mid-Cretaceous, roughly 100 million years ago, flowering plants had begun to form significant components of many ecosystems. They were no longer just weedy colonizers, but included shrubs and small trees. Magnolias, laurels, and early roses appeared. These plants offered new food sources for herbivorous dinosaurs, but they also presented challenges. Many flowering plants evolved chemical defenses, alkaloids, tannins, and other toxic compounds, more diverse and potent than those of gymnosperms. Herbivores had to evolve new detoxification mechanisms or feeding strategies to deal with these defenses. The response of herbivorous dinosaurs to the angiosperm revolution was varied and complex.
Some groups seem to have largely ignored flowering plants, continuing to feed on conifers and ferns.
The sauropods, which declined in diversity during the Cretaceous in many parts of the world, may have been victims of their own specialization, unable to adapt their simple tooth and gut structure to new food sources. In South America, however, tyrannosaurs continued to thrive, possibly because flowering plants were slower to dominate in that isolated continent. Other dinosaur groups embraced the new plants enthusiastically. The hadrosaurs, or duck-billed dinosaurs, underwent a spectacular radiation in the late Cretaceous that seems directly linked to angiosperm diversification. Their complex dental batteries, consisting of hundreds of small teeth arranged in grinding surfaces, were perfect for processing tough, fibrous angiosperm leaves. The wear patterns on hadrosaur teeth match those expected from eating flowering plants, and coprolites, fossilized feces, contain angiosperm remains. Ceratopsians, the horned dinosaurs, also show adaptations that may relate to angiosperm feeding. Their powerful beaks and shearing teeth were well suited for cutting through tough, woody material. Their large guts could process fibrous plant material through fermentation. The tremendous diversity of ceratopsians in the late Cretaceous, with dozens of species with different horn and frill arrangements, may reflect specialization on different plant resources in angiosperm-dominated ecosystems. The relationship between dinosaurs and flowering plants wasn't one-sided. Dinosaurs almost certainly played important roles in angiosperm ecology and evolution. Large herbivores would have been effective seed dispersers, consuming fruits and depositing seeds in their droppings far from parent plants. Dinosaur trampling and browsing would have created the disturbed habitats where many early angiosperms thrived.
Some researchers have even suggested that the rapid evolution of angiosperms was partly driven by herbivore pressure, with plants evolving new defenses and growth strategies in response to dinosaur browsing. The rise of flowering plants also transformed the base of terrestrial food webs. Angiosperm leaves were generally more nutritious than gymnosperm foliage, with higher protein content and less indigestible fiber. This meant that herbivores could extract more nutrition from less plant material. Angiosperm seeds and fruits provided concentrated packages of nutrients that could support small animals. The increased productivity of angiosperm-dominated ecosystems could support more herbivores, which in turn could support more carnivores. The insects underwent their own revolution in response to flowering plants. New groups evolved to exploit floral resources: bees, butterflies, and specialized beetles. Others evolved to eat angiosperm leaves, wood, and seeds. This explosion of insect diversity provided food for small theropod dinosaurs, early birds, and mammals. The complex ecological relationships we see today between plants, pollinators, herbivores, and predators first evolved during the Cretaceous co-revolution of angiosperms and insects. Flowering plants also changed the physical structure of terrestrial environments. Unlike the relatively open understories of conifer forests, angiosperm forests could have dense, tangled understories of shrubs, vines, and herbs. This created new habitats for small animals, but may have been challenging for large dinosaurs to navigate. Angiosperm trees grew faster than most gymnosperms, allowing forests to recover more quickly from disturbances like fires, floods, or dinosaur damage. The evolution of grasses, though they wouldn't dominate until after the dinosaur extinction, began during the Cretaceous. These specialized angiosperms, with their growth points at the base rather than tips of leaves, were perfectly adapted to withstand grazing. Though true grasslands didn't exist during the Mesozoic,
Early grasses may have formed components of forest understories and wetland margins, providing food for small ornithopod dinosaurs. The geographic spread of flowering plants wasn't uniform. They seem to have originated in the tropics and spread poleward over millions of years. Different continents, increasingly isolated by rising sea levels and continental drift, developed unique angiosperm floras. This geographic variation in plant communities may have driven dinosaur provincialism, with different species evolving on different continents to exploit local plant resources. Climate change during the Cretaceous was intimately linked with plant evolution. The warm, wet conditions of the mid-Cretaceous were ideal for angiosperm diversification. But as the climate cooled and dried toward the end of the period, plant communities changed. Deciduous forests, where trees dropped their leaves seasonally, became more common at higher latitudes. This seasonality in food availability would have created new challenges for herbivorous dinosaurs, possibly driving migrations or changes in feeding behavior. The chemical ecology of Cretaceous ecosystems became increasingly complex with angiosperm evolution. Plants evolved not just toxins, but also attractants, fragrances to lure pollinators, sweet fruits to entice seed dispersers. Some plants may have formed mutualistic relationships with dinosaurs, providing nutrition in exchange for seed dispersal or protection from other herbivores. Others evolved extreme defenses, thorns, caustic saps, or leaves too tough for most herbivores to process. The dinosaurs that thrived in this changing world were those that could adapt. Dental batteries of hadrosaurs became more complex over time, suggesting an evolutionary arms race with increasingly tough plant foods. Ankylosaurs evolved ever more elaborate armor, possibly in response to both predation pressure and the need to push through increasingly dense vegetation. Small ornithopods remained diverse and successful, their generalist feeding habits allowing them to exploit various plant resources. But not all dinosaurs succeeded in this new world. The decline of sauropods in many parts of the world during the Cretaceous may reflect their inability to adapt to angiosperm-dominated ecosystems. Their simple, peg-like teeth couldn't process tough angiosperm leaves efficiently. Their long necks, evolved to browse high in conifer canopies, may have been less advantageous in forests dominated by lower-growing angiosperms. Only in some parts of the world, particularly South America and parts of Africa, did sauropods remain dominant until the end of the Cretaceous. The fossil record preserves intimate moments of dinosaur-plant interactions from this revolutionary time. Coprolites containing ground-up angiosperm leaves, complete with cell structures visible under microscopes. Dinosaur teeth, with microscopic wear patterns indicating the types of plants consumed. Gastroliths associated with herbivore skeletons, worn smooth from grinding plant material in muscular gizzards. Even fossil flowers preserved in dinosaur nesting material, possibly used for nest construction or concealment. By the end of the Cretaceous, 66 million years ago, flowering plants had thoroughly conquered terrestrial ecosystems. They formed dense tropical rainforests, deciduous woodlands, and early predecessors of modern plant communities. The world of cycads and conifers that had nurtured the first dinosaurs was largely gone, replaced by a world of flowers, fruits, and broad leaves. The dinosaurs that remained had adapted to this new world, evolving remarkable specializations for exploiting angiosperm resources. The extinction event that ended the age of dinosaurs
also devastated plant communities. The darkness following the asteroid impact would have been particularly catastrophic for photosynthetic organisms, but flowering plants, with their rapid growth and diverse reproductive strategies, recovered more quickly than gymnosperms. In the aftermath of extinction, it was angiosperms that would dominate the recovering world, providing the ecological foundation for the age of mammals that followed. The day the sky fell, 66 million years ago, on what began as an ordinary day in the late Cretaceous, the cosmos delivered a blow that would end the 150 million year reign of the dinosaurs. The asteroid that struck Earth's Yucatan Peninsula was not the largest impact our planet had ever experienced, but its timing, location, and the particular chemistry of its target rocks created a perfect storm of destruction. Within hours, thriving ecosystems that had existed for millions of years were reduced to burning wastelands. Within days, the entire planet was shrouded in darkness. Within years, 3/4 of all species on Earth had vanished forever. This is the story of how the Age of Giants ended not with a whimper, but with the most spectacular catastrophe in the last 500 million years of Earth's history. The asteroid that ended the Mesozoic era was roughly 6 to 9 miles in diameter, a mountain-sized chunk of rock and metal that had been wandering through space for billions of years. Traveling at perhaps 45,000 miles per hour, it contained the energy of billions of nuclear weapons. As it entered Earth's atmosphere, the air in front of it couldn't move out of the way fast enough and became compressed into a plasma hotter than the surface of the sun. To any creature looking up at that moment, it would have appeared as if a second sun was racing across the sky, growing brighter by the second. The impact site could hardly have been worse. The Yucatan Peninsula was covered by a shallow sea underlain by limestone, which contains carbon, and anhydrite, which contains sulfur. These rocks would vaporize upon impact, releasing massive quantities of carbon dioxide and sulfur compounds into the atmosphere. Had the asteroid struck just hours earlier or later, hitting deep ocean or volcanic rock instead, the consequences might have been far less severe. But fate placed it perfectly to maximize destruction. When the asteroid struck, it released energy equivalent to billions of Hiroshima bombs. The initial impact created a crater over 100 miles wide and 12 miles deep, though it would quickly collapse and partially refill. The kinetic energy was instantly converted to heat, vaporizing the asteroid itself along with a massive volume of target rock. A fireball of superheated rock vapor expanded outward from the impact site, incinerating everything within 1,000 miles. The heat pulse was so intense that it would have ignited any organic material, plants, animals, even soil rich in organic matter, across much of North America. The impact generated earthquakes of unprecedented magnitude, possibly exceeding magnitude 11, far more powerful than any earthquake in recorded human history. These seismic waves raced through Earth's crust at thousands of miles per hour. When they reached the opposite side of the planet, they converged, causing massive destruction. In India, the Deccan traps, already erupting, may have intensified their activity in response to these seismic waves. Around the globe, dormant faults ruptured, triggering landslides and additional earthquakes that continued for days. As the initial crater formed, massive amounts of pulverized rock were ejected into the atmosphere and beyond.
Some of this material achieved escape velocity, leaving Earth entirely, but most fell back, re-entering the atmosphere as billions of white-hot meteors. For hours after the impact, the sky literally fell as these incandescent particles rained down globally. The combined heat from these returning particles raised atmospheric temperatures by hundreds of degrees. The infrared radiation at ground level may have approached that of a kitchen oven set to broil. Any organism that couldn't find shelter underground, underwater, or in caves would have been literally cooked alive. In the seas around the impact site, the devastation was immediate and total. The impact generated tsunamis possibly exceeding 300 feet in height that raced across the Gulf of Mexico and Atlantic Ocean. These waves, traveling at jet aircraft speeds, struck coastlines hours after the impact, penetrating miles inland and scouring away entire ecosystems. Marine sediments from this time show evidence of massive underwater landslides and turbidity currents that resuspended millions of years of accumulated seafloor sediments. But the immediate destruction from heat, earthquakes, and tsunamis was just the beginning. As the ejected material settled and cooled, it formed a layer of dust and ash that enveloped the entire planet. This layer, rich in iridium from the vaporized asteroid, is now preserved in rocks worldwide as the KPG boundary layer, a geological calling card of catastrophe. The amount of material in this layer is staggering. Billions of tons of pulverized rock spread across every continent and ocean floor. The sulfur compounds released from vaporized anhydrite combined with water in the atmosphere to form sulfuric acid aerosols. These aerosols reflected sunlight back into space, while the dust blocked what little light remained. Within days, the entire planet was plunged into darkness. Photosynthesis, the foundation of most food webs, ceased. Temperatures plummeted as the sun's warmth couldn't reach the surface. This impact winter may have lasted months or even years, with temperatures dropping by 20 to 30 degrees Celsius globally. For the dinosaurs and other organisms that survived the initial impact effects, this darkness was catastrophic. Plants began dying immediately without sunlight. Herbivores, even if they survived the initial heat and fires, found themselves in a world without food. The great herds of hadrosaurs and ceratopsians that had numbered in the millions starved within weeks or months. Carnivores might have survived longer, feeding on carcasses, but eventually they too succumbed as the food web collapsed from the bottom up. The darkness wasn't uniform. It was likely deepest in the months immediately following the impact, then gradually lightened as dust settled from the atmosphere. But even dim light wouldn't have been enough to restart photosynthesis immediately. The sulfuric acid aerosols remained suspended much longer than dust, continuing to block sunlight and causing acid rain that would have further devastated any surviving plants. The rain was so acidic it could have dissolved limestone and killed organisms in freshwater systems. In the oceans, the collapse was equally dramatic. Marine phytoplankton, the base of ocean food webs, died en masse without sunlight. The fossil record shows a dramatic dead zone in marine sediments, virtually devoid of the microscopic shells that normally accumulate on the seafloor.
Marine reptiles, already stressed by the loss of coastal habitats from tsunamis, starved as fish populations crashed. The sophisticated marine ecosystems that had existed for millions of years simplified to bare survival communities of scavengers and organisms that could survive on chemical energy rather than sunlight. Different groups of organisms fared differently based on their ecological strategies.
Animals that could enter dormancy had advantages. Crocodiles could slow their metabolisms and survive without food for months. Small mammals and birds that could shelter in burrows and survive on seeds and insects had better chances than large animals with high food requirements. Freshwater communities, buffered somewhat from the acid rain and with food chains based partly on detritus, fared better than terrestrial or marine ecosystems. The selectivity of the extinction provides clues about conditions during this catastrophe. No purely terrestrial animal weighing more than about 55 pounds survived. This suggests that body size, with its associated food requirements and inability to shelter effectively, was a critical factor. Animals that could fly had no particular advantage. Pterosaurs went extinct while flightless birds survived. Marine reptiles disappeared while sharks and crocodiles persisted, suggesting that the ability to scavenge and survive long periods without food was more important than being apex predators. As months turned to years, the planet slowly began to recover. Dust settled from the atmosphere, allowing weak sunlight to return. Acid rain gradually depleted the sulfur compounds in the atmosphere. Temperatures slowly rose from their impact winter lows. But the world that emerged from the darkness was fundamentally different from what came before. The dominant large animals were gone. Entire ecological niches were vacant. The stage was set for a new evolutionary radiation. The recovery happened at different rates in different places. Fossil evidence suggests that some areas, particularly at high latitudes, recovered more quickly, possibly because they were already adapted to seasonal darkness and had ecosystems less dependent on continuous photosynthesis. Ferns, which can reproduce from spores that survived in soil, were among the first plants to recolonize devastated landscapes, creating what paleontologists call a fern spike in the fossil record. The immediate aftermath of the extinction was likely characterized by disaster taxa, opportunistic species that could thrive in disturbed environments. Fungi flourished on the massive amounts of dead organic matter. Insects that could feed on detritus exploded in numbers. Small mammals emerged from their burrows to find a world where their former predators and competitors were gone. Birds, the only dinosaur lineage to survive, began diversifying to fill empty ecological niches. Within a few million years, mammals had evolved from small, mostly nocturnal creatures to diverse forms filling many ecological roles once occupied by dinosaurs. Early Paleocene mammals included primitive ungulates, early primates, and various extinct groups. But they remained relatively small for millions of years, as if the ecological trauma of the extinction had reset the evolutionary clock on body size. It would take 10 million years before mammals approached the sizes of even modest-sized dinosaurs. The extinction of the dinosaurs wasn't instantaneous or uniform globally. Some populations, particularly those in isolated or environmentally buffered locations, may have survived weeks, months, or even years after the impact. There are controversial claims of dinosaur fossils found above the KPG boundary, suggesting temporary survival.
But if any non-avian dinosaurs survived the immediate aftermath, they didn't persist long enough to recover. The combination of environmental stresses was simply too severe for large, specialized animals to overcome. The deck entraps volcanism, which continued for hundreds of thousands of years after the impact, may have prolonged the environmental crisis and prevented rapid recovery.
These eruptions released additional greenhouse gases and sulfur compounds, causing alternating periods of cooling from sulfur aerosols and warming from carbon dioxide. This climatic instability would have made recovery more difficult for surviving organisms trying to re-establish stable ecosystems. Recent research has revealed additional killers beyond darkness and cold. The heat pulse from returning impact ejecta may have caused global wildfires, destroying forests and releasing massive amounts of carbon dioxide. The soot from these fires, preserved in KPG boundary sediments worldwide, would have added to atmospheric opacity. Ocean acidification from dissolved carbon dioxide would have stressed marine organisms with calcium carbonate shells. The ozone layer was likely destroyed, exposing survivors to harmful ultraviolet radiation once the dust cleared. The impact also provides a sobering reminder of Earth's vulnerability to cosmic threats. The asteroid that killed the dinosaurs was not unique. Earth has been struck by similar or larger objects throughout its history, and will be struck again. The KPG impact was actually relatively small compared to some ancient impacts. Yet it was sufficient to end the Age of Giants and redirect the course of evolution. Modern telescope surveys have identified thousands of near-Earth asteroids, though none currently pose an immediate threat. The aftermath, when death gave birth to a new world. The world did not end with a bang alone. It ended with silence. In the hours after the asteroid struck, as the dust clouds consumed the sky and the fires raged across continents, something unprecedented happened. The Earth fell silent. For the first time in 150 million years, the thunderous footsteps of giants ceased. The bellowing calls that had echoed across valleys went unheard. The skies, once filled with the leathery wings of pterosaurs, stood empty. But this was not the end of the story. It was, in a profound and terrible way, a new beginning. The asteroid that crashed into the Yucatan Peninsula 66 million years ago did not simply kill the dinosaurs. It reset the entire biological clock of our planet. It cleared the stage, swept away the old cast, and made room for an entirely different performance. And in that performance, small furry creatures that had cowered in the shadows for millions of years would finally get their moment in the spotlight. Let us walk through the aftermath, through the years and millennia that followed that catastrophic day. Let us witness how death, on an unimaginable scale, gave birth to the world we know today. The first hours after impact were apocalyptic beyond comprehension. The initial blast wave had already killed everything within 1,000 kilometers. But that was just the opening act. Within minutes, debris ejected from the impact site began raining back down across the entire planet. These weren't small pebbles. Some were boulders the size of houses, heated to thousands of degrees as they screamed back through the atmosphere. They struck the ground with such force that they created their own secondary impact craters. This bombardment of superheated debris had a horrifying effect. It turned the atmosphere itself into an oven.
For several hours, the global temperature spiked dramatically. Any animal exposed to the open sky would have been cooked alive. Forests burst into flames spontaneously. The very air became lethal. Only those creatures underground, underwater, or sheltered in deep caves had any chance of survival. The small mammals, whose ancestors had spent millions of years perfecting the art of burrowing and hiding, suddenly found their lifestyle to be the ultimate survival strategy. The dinosaurs, magnificent in their size and strength, had nowhere to hide. Their era of dominance became their death sentence. But the heat was only the beginning. As the debris settled, it formed a thick layer of dust and soot in the upper atmosphere. This dust cloud spread across the entire planet within weeks, blocking out the sun. The world plunged into darkness. High noon looked like twilight. Twilight looked like midnight. And this darkness would last not for days or weeks, but for months, possibly years. Without sunlight, photosynthesis stopped. Plants began to die. First the delicate flowering plants, then the ferns, and eventually even the hardy conifers. As plants died, the herbivores that depended on them followed. And as herbivores died, the carnivores that hunted them starved in turn. The food chain collapsed from the bottom up, link by terrible link. In the oceans, the situation was equally catastrophic. The impact had created massive tsunamis that scoured coastlines clean of life. The lack of sunlight killed the phytoplankton, the microscopic organisms at the base of the marine food web. Without them, the zooplankton died. Without zooplankton, small fish died. The collapse rippled upward through the food chain until even the great marine reptiles, the mosasaurs and plesiosaurs that had ruled the seas, found themselves in a dying ocean. The temperature plummeted. With the sun blocked, the planet cooled rapidly. The Cretaceous world had been warm, almost tropical even at the poles. Now, it experienced something closer to nuclear winter. Species adapted to warmth found themselves in a suddenly frigid world. Many of the surviving animals died from the cold alone. Yet in this darkness, some life persisted. The survivors were not the strongest or the largest. They were the most adaptable, the most resourceful, the most able to make do with almost nothing. Small mammals survived by eating whatever they could find: seeds that had been stored underground, insects, carrion, roots, anything. Their small size meant they needed less food. Their fur kept them warm. Their ability to burrow protected them from the worst of the temperature swings. They were, quite literally, built for this catastrophe in ways the dinosaurs never could be. Birds survived, though not all of them. The larger ground-dwelling birds, relatives of the dinosaurs they descended from, mostly perished. But smaller birds, especially those that could eat seeds and insects, made it through. They could fly to find food. They could migrate to less devastated areas. Their feathers provided insulation. They were dinosaurs in a sense, but dinosaurs that had evolved to be small and flexible. Crocodiles and their relatives survived,
as did turtles, lizards, and snakes. These reptiles had slower metabolisms than dinosaurs. They could go longer without food. Some could brumate, entering a state of dormancy that allowed them to wait out the worst conditions. Freshwater environments, less affected than the oceans, provided refuges where these creatures could persist. Amphibians, frogs, and salamanders survived in surprising numbers. Their aquatic larvae could feed on detritus and organic matter. They could survive in small, isolated pools and streams. Their permeable skin and cold-blooded nature, usually considered limitations, became advantages in a world where food was scarce and temperatures were low. Even some plants survived. Those with seeds that could remain dormant in soil for years or decades found that when the dust finally cleared and sunlight returned, they could germinate and grow again. Ferns, ancient and resilient, spread rapidly in the devastated landscape. They had survived previous mass extinctions. They would survive this one too. The darkness lasted for months, perhaps a year or more. When the dust finally began to settle, the world that emerged was transformed beyond recognition. The great forests were gone, replaced by bare ground and scattered dead wood. The mighty rivers still flowed, but their banks were silent. The skies remained empty of giant forms. Yet life, persistent and determined, began to recover. The first green shoots pushed up through the ash-covered soil. Ferns spread across the barren landscapes. Insects, many of whose eggs had survived underground, hatched in new generations. And with insects came birds and small mammals to eat them. But the recovery was not smooth or quick. The planet faced another crisis in the years following the impact. When the dust settled, it revealed that the asteroid had struck a region rich in sulfur-bearing rocks. The impact had vaporized these rocks, sending massive amounts of sulfur dioxide into the atmosphere. This sulfur combined with water vapor to create sulfuric acid rain. For years, acidic rain fell across the planet. It burned the new vegetation. It poisoned rivers and lakes. It made the oceans even more hostile to life. The recovery that had begun was set back repeatedly. Life was trying to restart in a world that kept punishing it for the attempt. The climate remained unstable for thousands of years. Without the moderating influence of vast forests, temperatures swung wildly. The planet alternated between periods of intense cold and sudden warmth. The weather patterns were chaotic and unpredictable. Yet slowly, agonizingly slowly, stability returned. The sulfur washed out of the atmosphere. The acid rain became normal rain. Carbon dioxide released by volcanic activity and decaying organic matter began to accumulate in the atmosphere, creating a greenhouse effect that warmed the planet again. After the years of cold and darkness, this warming was welcome. 10,000 years after the impact, the world was still unrecognizable compared to the Cretaceous. But it was recovering. Forests began to grow again. Different forests, dominated by flowering plants rather than conifers. These forests spread across the continents, turning the barren wastelands green once more.
And in these recovering forests, the survivors began to diversify. The small mammals that had persisted through the catastrophe found themselves in a world of opportunity. With the dinosaurs gone, ecological niches stood empty. There were no giant herbivores eating the vegetation. There were no large predators hunting in the forests. The stage was set for an explosion of mammalian evolution. Within a few million years, mammals that had been small and shrew-like began evolving into larger forms. Some became herbivores, developing specialized teeth for grinding plants. Others became predators, evolving sharp teeth and hunting strategies. Still others took to the trees, developing grasping hands and better vision. The age of mammals had begun. Birds, too, diversified rapidly. With pterosaurs gone, the skies were open territory. Birds evolved into countless new forms, from tiny hummingbirds to large flightless species. They filled niches that dinosaurs once occupied, proving that the dinosaur lineage, through birds, was far from extinct. In the oceans, marine mammals began to appear. Creatures that had been terrestrial returned to the sea, evolving into whales, dolphins, and seals. They filled the niches left empty by the marine reptiles. The ocean, once dominated by mosasaurs and plesiosaurs, became the domain of warm-blooded, air-breathing mammals. The world was rebuilding itself, but it was building something new. The Mesozoic era of reptilian dominance was over. The Cenozoic era, the age of mammals, had begun. And among those mammals, tens of millions of years later, would evolve a species that would eventually learn to dig up the bones of dinosaurs and piece together this entire story. We are the children of that catastrophe. Our ancestors, small and insignificant in the age of dinosaurs, survived because they were adapted for a world that didn't yet exist. When that world arrived in fire and darkness, they were ready.
Every human being alive today is a descendant of those survivors. The extinction of the dinosaurs was not simply a tragedy. It was also an opportunity. It cleared space for new forms of life. It allowed evolution to explore new possibilities. It led, through countless steps and millions of years, to us. But we should not see this as destiny or proof of superiority. We survived by accident, by the fortune of being small and adaptable at exactly the right moment. The dinosaurs were magnificent creatures that dominated the earth for longer than mammals have existed. They were not failures. They were victims of an unpredictable cosmic lottery. And their story reminds us of a humbling truth. Dominance is temporary. Success is fragile. The universe does not care about size or strength or evolutionary sophistication. An asteroid does not discriminate. It simply strikes, and the world changes. The dinosaurs taught us that life can flourish in forms we barely imagine. They showed us that success can last for geological ages. But their end teaches us something equally important. Nothing lasts forever. The stage will always clear eventually. The only question is, who will be ready when it does? The detective work, how we piece together a lost world. Imagine for a moment that you are standing in a desert. The sun beats down mercilessly. The landscape stretches endlessly in shades of red and brown. You are utterly alone, surrounded by nothing but rock and sand and silence. You look down at your feet, and there, embedded in stone, you see something that should not exist. A footprint. 3 toes.
each one as long as your forearm, pressed into rock as if the stone were once soft mud. Which, impossibly, it was. 67 million years ago. You are looking at a moment frozen in time. A single step taken by a creature that has been dead longer than the Rocky Mountains have existed. And in that instant, you realize something extraordinary. The past is not gone. It is buried. And if you know where to look and how to read the evidence, you can bring it back to life. This is the story of how we know what we know. How scientists over the past 2 centuries became detectives of deep time. How they learned to read rocks like books, bones like blueprints, and fossils like photographs. How they reconstructed an entire lost world from fragments and shadows and traces left behind in stone. It began, as many great discoveries do, with someone noticing something strange. In the early 1800s, in the English countryside, a woman named Mary Anning was making her living in an unusual way. She collected fossils from the cliffs along the southern coast of England and sold them to collectors and museums. This was not a hobby, it was survival. Mary and her family were poor, and the fossil trade was one of the few ways they could make money. But Mary Anning was not simply a collector. She was a scientist, though the world of her time would never have called her that. She studied the fossils she found with meticulous care. She noticed patterns, she made connections, and she discovered creatures that no one had ever imagined. In 1811, when Mary was just 12 years old, she and her brother uncovered something extraordinary in the cliffs near their home in Lyme Regis. It was a skull, unlike anything anyone had seen before. It was enormous, nearly 2 meters long, with huge eye sockets and jaws filled with sharp teeth. Over the following months, Mary carefully excavated the rest of the skeleton. It was a complete marine reptile, later named Ichthyosaurus, the fish lizard. This discovery sent shock waves through the scientific world. Here was proof that creatures had existed in the ancient past that no longer walked the earth, creatures that did not fit into any known category of animal. The implications were staggering. If species could go extinct, then the history of life was not static. It had changed dramatically over time.
Mary Anning would make many more discoveries. She found the first complete plesiosaurus, another marine reptile with a long neck and paddle-like limbs. She discovered pterosaur fossils, the first evidence that reptiles had once flown. With each discovery, she pushed back the boundaries of what was known about the ancient world. But she was not alone in this work. Around the same time, other fossil hunters were making their own shocking discoveries. In 1822, in southern England, a country doctor named Gideon Mantell was shown some unusual teeth by his wife, Mary Ann. She had found them in a pile of gravel being used to repair a road. The teeth were large, serrated, and unlike anything Mantell had ever seen. They resembled the teeth of modern iguanas, but they were enormous, far too large to have come from any living reptile. Mantell realized he had found something significant. These teeth belonged to an extinct reptile, one that must have been gigantic. He named it Iguanodon, iguana tooth. It was one of the first dinosaurs ever scientifically described, though the word dinosaur did not yet exist. As more fossils were discovered, scientists struggled to make sense of them. These ancient reptiles were bizarre beyond imagination. Some had teeth like knives, others had teeth like grinding mills. Some seemed built for running, others for swimming.
The variety was overwhelming. In 1842, a brilliant and ambitious British anatomist named Richard Owen reviewed all the fossil evidence that had been accumulating. He noticed something crucial. These extinct reptiles were not simply large versions of modern lizards or crocodiles. They had unique anatomical features. Their legs were positioned directly underneath their bodies, not sprawled out to the sides like modern reptiles. This suggested they could move more efficiently, more like mammals than reptiles. Owen proposed that these creatures represented a distinct group, fundamentally different from living reptiles.
He needed a name for them. He chose Greek roots, Deinos, meaning terrible or fearfully great, and sauros, meaning lizard. Dinosauria, the terrible lizards. The word dinosaur entered the English language, and with it, humanity's fascination with these lost giants began in earnest. But fossils alone could only tell part of the story. The early reconstructions of dinosaurs were wildly inaccurate. Iguanodon was initially depicted as a giant four-legged creature with a spike on its nose. That spike was actually a thumb claw, and Iguanodon could walk on two legs. Dinosaurs were imagined as slow, stupid, sluggish creatures that dragged their tails on the ground and spent most of their time in swamps to support their massive weight. These misconceptions persisted for over a century. Why? Because scientists were interpreting dinosaurs through the lens of modern reptiles. If a 20-ton animal existed today, it would need to be in water to support its weight, like a hippopotamus. If a reptile existed today, it would be cold-blooded, slow-moving, dependent on external heat. The Victorian scientists assumed dinosaurs were simply scaled-up versions of crocodiles and lizards. It took new discoveries and new ways of thinking to overturn these assumptions. And one of those new ways of thinking emerged from an unexpected place: the study of birds. In 1861, workers in a limestone quarry in Bavaria, Germany, split open a slab of rock and found something that would change everything. Preserved in exquisite detail was a fossil of a creature with feathers and wings, clearly capable of flight, but also with teeth, claws on its wings, and a long, bony tail. It was a chimera, a blend of bird and reptile. It was named Archaeopteryx, ancient wing. Archaeopteryx was a transitional fossil, a creature caught in the act of evolution. It showed that birds had not appeared fully formed. They had evolved from reptilian ancestors. This fossil provided powerful evidence for Darwin's theory of evolution, published just 2 years earlier. But the full implications took longer to realize. If birds evolved from reptiles, and if birds were warm-blooded, active, intelligent creatures, then perhaps their reptilian ancestors were too. Perhaps dinosaurs were not sluggish swamp dwellers after all. This realization came gradually, through decades of research. In the 1960s and 1970s, a new generation of paleontologists began re-examining old assumptions. Scientists like John Ostrom studied the anatomy of small carnivorous dinosaurs in detail. He noticed that these dinosaurs had bird-like features: light, hollow bones, grasping hands, large eyes, and brains. They looked built for speed and agility. Ostrom described a small predatory dinosaur called Deinonychus, terrible claw. This creature was clearly an active hunter, with a large, sickle-shaped claw on each foot for slashing prey. It could not have been a slow, cold-blooded reptile.
It must have been quick, agile, possibly warm-blooded. The image of dinosaurs began to change dramatically. This shift in thinking led to what became known as the dinosaur renaissance. Suddenly, dinosaurs were no longer seen as evolutionary failures, doomed by their own limitations. They were successful, sophisticated animals that had dominated the planet for over 150 million years. They were active, social, possibly even intelligent. And their descendants, the birds, were still alive today. The evidence supporting this new view came from many sources. Fossilized trackways showed that many dinosaurs walked with an upright posture, carrying their tails off the ground for balance. Some trackways showed evidence of herding behavior, with groups of dinosaurs traveling together. Fossilized nests revealed that some dinosaurs cared for their young, building elaborate nesting colonies like modern seabirds.
The discovery of feathered dinosaurs in China in the 1990s provided stunning confirmation of the link between dinosaurs and birds. Fossils preserved in fine-grained sediment showed clear impressions of feathers on dinosaurs that could not possibly fly. These feathers must have served other purposes: insulation, display, camouflage. Feathers had evolved before flight. Modern technology brought new tools to paleontology. CT scans allowed scientists to peer inside fossils without destroying them, revealing details of skull structure, brain cavities, and inner ears. Chemical analysis of fossilized bones revealed information about diet and metabolism. Computer modeling allowed researchers to test how dinosaurs moved, how much they weighed, how fast they could run. One of the most exciting developments was the discovery of soft tissue preservation. For decades, scientists assumed that nothing but bones and teeth could fossilize. Everything else, muscles, organs, skin, feathers, would decay completely. But in recent years, researchers have found fossils that preserve microscopic details of soft tissue, blood vessels, pigment cells, even, in some cases, fragments of original proteins. These discoveries opened new windows into dinosaur biology. By analyzing pigment cells in feathered dinosaur fossils, scientists could determine the actual colors of some dinosaurs. A small raptor called Sinosauropteryx, for example, had a rusty red and white striped tail. Another dinosaur, Microraptor, had glossy black feathers with an iridescent sheen, like a raven. The study of coprolites, fossilized feces, revealed details of dinosaur diet and digestion. Fossilized gastroliths, stones swallowed to help grind food in the stomach, showed that some dinosaurs processed their food much like modern birds. Fossilized tooth marks on bones told stories of predation and scavenging. Even the rocks themselves contained information. The type of sediment in which a fossil was found revealed what kind of environment the dinosaur lived in. River deposits suggested a dinosaur lived near water. Desert sandstones indicated arid conditions. Volcanic ash layers provided precise dates for when the dinosaur died. Paleontologists became experts at reading these clues. They learned to reconstruct entire ecosystems from scattered evidence. A collection of fossils from a single location could reveal what plants grew there, what herbivores ate them, what predators hunted the herbivores, what the climate was like, how the landscape looked. The work of reconstructing the past is painstaking and slow. Finding a significant fossil can take years of searching in remote and hostile environments. Excavating a single skeleton might require months of careful work, removing tons of rock, grain by grain, to avoid damaging fragile bones. Preparing fossils in the laboratory
Removing the enclosing rock matrix and stabilizing the bone can take years more. And even after all that work, what remains is fragmentary. Most dinosaur species are known from only a few bones. Complete skeletons are rare treasures. Everything else must be inferred, extrapolated, guessed at based on comparisons with related species and modern analogs. Yet from these fragments, scientists have reconstructed an entire world. They have determined how dinosaurs grew, how they moved, what they ate, how they reproduced, how they communicated, how they lived, and how they died. They have brought the Mesozoic back to life in our imaginations. This detective work continues today. Every year brings new discoveries. New species are named. Old species are reinterpreted. Theories are refined or overturned. Our understanding of dinosaurs is not fixed. It evolves constantly as new evidence emerges.
And the most remarkable thing? This entire reconstruction of deep time, this bringing back to life of creatures dead for millions of years, is based on the tiniest fraction of the animals that actually lived. Most dinosaurs left no fossils at all. Their bodies decayed completely, leaving no trace. We will never know the vast majority of species that once existed. What we see in museums and documentaries is the tip of the iceberg, a sampling, a glimpse. The Mesozoic world was far more diverse, far stranger, far more wonderful than we can ever know. Every fossil we find is a miracle of preservation, a message from deep time that by all rights should never have survived. And that makes the story even more extraordinary. From these scattered messages, these fragments of bone and impressions in stone, we have reconstructed an entire era of Earth's history. We have learned that the world was once ruled by giants. We have discovered that those giants were not failures, but triumphs of evolution. We have found that they did not disappear completely. They still fly above us every day as birds. This is the power of science. To read the past in stone, to speak with the dead, to travel backward through unimaginable spans of time and witness events that no human ever saw, to piece together a lost world from clues that most people would walk past without noticing. The rocks beneath our feet contain libraries of information. The fossils within them are books waiting to be read. And we have learned, slowly and painstakingly, how to read that ancient language, how to translate stone into story, how to turn fragments into understanding. This detective work is not finished. It will never be finished. There are still vast periods of the Mesozoic that we know almost nothing about. Entire continents where fossils remain undiscovered. Questions that remain unanswered. Mysteries waiting to be solved. But each discovery brings us closer to understanding. Each fossil adds another piece to the puzzle. Each year, the lost world of the dinosaurs comes a little more clearly into focus. And with each breakthrough, we are reminded of something profound. The past is not truly gone. It is preserved, waiting, and with patience, skill, and careful observation, we can bring it back to life. The legacy: why dinosaurs still matter. On a warm summer evening, a child looks up at the darkening sky and sees a bird perched on a telephone wire. A common sparrow, small, brown, unremarkable. The child does not know that they are looking at a dinosaur, a living, breathing descendant of creatures that once shook the earth with their footsteps.
The child does not know that this tiny bird carries within its body the genetic legacy of the Mesozoic, a thread of life that stretches back unbroken for 230 million years. Most people do not know this either, but once you learn it, you can never look at birds the same way again. This is the first and most tangible legacy of the dinosaurs. They are not extinct, not entirely. They transformed, adapted, survived. Every time you see a robin pulling a worm from the ground, every time you hear a crow's intelligent call, every time you watch geese flying in formation across an autumn sky, you are witnessing the continuation of the dinosaur lineage. The age of dinosaurs did not end. It changed form, but it never truly ended. This realization fundamentally changed how we understand evolution. For centuries, extinction was viewed as failure. Species that went extinct were considered evolutionary dead ends, creatures that could not adapt, that were outcompeted, that deserved their fate. The dinosaurs were the ultimate example. Huge, specialized, inflexible creatures that could not survive when conditions changed. But that narrative is completely wrong. Dinosaurs were not failures. They were the most successful group of land animals in Earth's history.
They dominated every continent for longer than mammals have existed. They evolved into thousands of species, from chicken-sized hunters to animals larger than blue whales. They conquered land, air, and sea. They survived multiple mass extinctions before the final asteroid impact. And even that final catastrophe did not completely destroy them. The birds survived, carrying forward the dinosaur legacy into a new era. Today there are more than 10,000 species of birds. They live on every continent, including Antarctica. They occupy nearly every ecological niche, from Arctic tundra to tropical rainforests to open ocean. By any measure, the dinosaur lineage remains wildly successful. This teaches us something crucial about the nature of success and failure in evolution. Survival is not about being the biggest or the strongest. It is about being adaptable. It is about having the right traits at the right time. The massive sauropods and fierce tyrannosaurs died, but their small feathered relatives survived. Size and power meant nothing when the world went dark. Flexibility and adaptability meant everything. But the legacy of dinosaurs extends far beyond the birds that survived. The dinosaurs shaped the modern world in ways most people never consider. Think about the plants you see around you, the flowers in gardens, the grass in parks, the trees lining streets. These flowering plants, angiosperms, rose to dominance during the Cretaceous period in partnership with dinosaurs. Herbivorous dinosaurs ate these plants and dispersed their seeds across vast distances. They created clearings in forests through their feeding, allowing new plants to grow. They fertilized the soil with their droppings. The explosive diversification of flowering plants during the late Cretaceous was driven in part by their relationship with dinosaurs. When the non-avian dinosaurs disappeared, this partnership ended, but the flowering plants remained, and they continued to diversify. Today, angiosperms make up about 90% of all plant species. They provide most of the food humans eat. They produce much of the oxygen we breathe. They shape the landscapes we inhabit, and their dominance began during the age of dinosaurs. The disappearance of the large dinosaurs also created opportunities that shaped the modern world. With the giant herbivores gone, mammals could grow larger. With the apex predators extinct, mammalian carnivores could evolve. The empty niches left by dinosaurs became the playgrounds of mammalian evolution. Within 10 million years of the asteroid impact, mammals had diversified into forms ranging from tiny shrews to animals the size of bears.
Within 30 million years, some mammals had returned to the sea, evolving into whales. Within 50 million years, mammals had produced species as large as any dinosaur. The modern world of elephants, rhinos, hippos, lions, wolves, dolphins, and bats exists because the dinosaurs disappeared and created space for these evolutionary experiments. And among those mammals, of course, were our own ancestors. The primates evolved during the Paleocene epoch, in the first few million years after the extinction. Our lineage, the line leading to humans, exists because small, tree-dwelling mammals found opportunities in the post-dinosaur world. We are, in a very real sense, the children of the catastrophe that ended the Mesozoic. But perhaps the most important legacy of dinosaurs is what they teach us about our own existence and our place in the universe. The dinosaurs remind us that dominance is temporary. For 165 million years, they were the undisputed rulers of the land. They seemed invincible, inevitable, permanent. Then a rock fell from space, and within months, they were gone. All that power, all that evolutionary success, all that biological sophistication, it meant nothing against cosmic chance.
Humans have dominated the Earth for perhaps 300,000 years. Our civilization is less than 10,000 years old. By geological standards, we have barely arrived. We have no guarantee of longevity, no promise that we will still be here in 1,000,000 years, much less 100 million. The dinosaurs teach us humility. They also teach us about the fragility of complex ecosystems. The Cretaceous world was intricate, with countless species dependent on each other in ways both obvious and subtle. When the asteroid struck, it did not just kill individual animals. It broke the connections between species. It shattered food webs. It destroyed relationships that had taken millions of years to evolve. The extinction was not just a loss of species, it was a loss of an entire world, an entire way of being. We live in an equally complex world. The ecosystems around us are products of millions of years of evolution, filled with connections and dependencies we barely understand. Climate change, habitat destruction, pollution, these are forces that could shatter our world as thoroughly as the asteroid shattered the Cretaceous. The dinosaurs show us what happens when ecosystems collapse. They show us that recovery takes millions of years, and what emerges is not the same as what was lost. Yet the dinosaurs also teach us about resilience. Life survived the asteroid impact. It survived the darkness, the cold, the acid rain, the chaos. It recovered, diversified, and eventually flourished again. Earth has experienced 5 major mass extinctions in its history. Each time life has bounced back. Evolution is remarkably creative, remarkably persistent. Given time, life finds ways to fill empty spaces, to exploit new opportunities, to rebuild complexity from simplicity. This is both comforting and disturbing. Comforting because it suggests that life as a whole will survive almost anything we throw at it. Disturbing because the recovery happens on timescales that are meaningless to humans. If we destroy the current world, yes, life will eventually recover. But that recovery will take 10 million years, perhaps 20 million.
Neither we nor anything we recognize will be part of it. The dinosaurs also revolutionized how we think about deep time. Before dinosaurs were discovered, most people in Western culture believed the Earth was only a few thousand years old. The idea of millions of years was inconceivable, almost unthinkable. But as more fossils were discovered, as geologists studied rock layers and calculated ages, it became clear that the Earth was unimaginably ancient. The dinosaurs were the proof that opened people's minds to this vastness. Here were creatures that had lived and died millions of years before humans existed. Here was evidence of entire worlds that had come and gone. The discovery of dinosaurs was one of the key insights that forced humanity to confront the true age of our planet and the immensity of geological time. This shift in perspective was revolutionary. It changed how we understand our place in nature. We are not the purpose of creation, the end point of history. We are one species among millions, living in one brief moment in an incomprehensibly long story. We arrived late to a very old party, and we have no idea how long we will be allowed to stay. Understanding deep time also changed how we think about change itself. In a human lifetime, the world seems stable. Mountains appear permanent. Continents seem fixed. Species seem unchanging. But zoom out to geological time, and everything is in motion. Mountains rise and erode. Continents drift and collide. Species evolve, flourish, and go extinct. Change is the only constant. Stability is an illusion created by our brief lifespans. The dinosaurs embodied this truth. They evolved from small bipedal ancestors into the most diverse group of land animals ever to exist. They adapted to every environment, every climate, every available niche. They changed constantly over their long reign. And when conditions changed catastrophically, most of them could not adapt quickly enough. But some could, and those survivors became the birds. This tells us something about the nature of evolution and adaptation. There is no such thing as perfect adaptation. There is only adaptation to current conditions. When conditions change, what was optimal becomes liability. What was marginal becomes advantageous. Evolution is not progress towards some goal. It is simply survival in the moment, with no guarantee of tomorrow. For scientists, the dinosaurs opened entire new fields of research. Paleontology became a serious scientific discipline, not just a curiosity. The study of extinction events led to understanding of how ecosystems respond to catastrophe. The discovery of the asteroid impact introduced the concept of cosmic threats to life on Earth. The recognition that birds are living dinosaurs revolutionized our understanding of evolution and the continuity of life. Dinosaurs also became a gateway to science for countless people, especially children. For many, dinosaurs are the first scientific topic that captures their imagination. They are spectacular, mysterious, and safely extinct. Fascinating, but not frightening. Learning about dinosaurs teaches children to think about evidence, to understand how science works, to grapple with concepts like time and change and extinction. Many professional scientists trace their interest in science back to childhood fascination with dinosaurs. In popular culture, dinosaurs have become icons. They appear in movies, books, toys, and museums. They capture something primal in the human imagination, the thrill of contemplating creatures far larger and stranger than anything alive today. They represent both wonder and terror, beauty and danger. They are dragons that actually existed, monsters that were real. But beyond entertainment and education, dinosaurs serve a deeper purpose. They are a mirror in which we can see ourselves more clearly. They show us what success looks like over millions of years. They show us what failure looks like in an instant. They show us that the world has been radically different in the past and will be radically different in the future. They show us that nothing is permanent, not even dominance that lasts for 100 million years. When you stand in a museum looking at a tyrannosaurus skeleton, you are looking at an impossibility made real. These bones are actual matter that was once part of a living animal, an animal that walked the earth millions of years before your ancestors evolved. The calcium in those bones, the minerals that replace them, the matrix of stone that preserve them, all of it is real, tangible, touchable. You are looking at physical proof of a lost world, and in that moment, if you let yourself truly feel it, you realize something profound. The world is older than we can imagine. Life has taken forms we struggle to comprehend. The history of this planet is written in stone and bone, waiting to be read. We are not the first to rule the earth, and we will not be the last. We are one chapter in an unfinished book, one verse in an epic poem that began billions of years ago and will continue long after we are gone. The dinosaurs ruled for 165 million years. They were successful beyond measure. They evolved, adapted, and dominated in ways no other land animals have matched. And then, in a cosmic instant, most of them were swept away. But they are not forgotten. They cannot be forgotten. Their bones remain. Their descendants fly overhead. Their legacy shapes the modern world in countless ways. Every bird you see is a reminder that the age of dinosaurs never truly ended. Every flower that blooms is a testament to partnerships formed in the Mesozoic.
Every mammal that walks the earth exists because the dinosaurs made space for them. And every human who looks up at the stars and wonders about cosmic threats does so because we learned that asteroids can end worlds. The dinosaurs were giants who ruled the earth for an almost inconceivable span of time, then vanished in the geological blink of an eye. They were real. They lived, breathed, ate, fought, reproduced, and died. They felt the sun on their scales and feathers. They heard the calls of their own kind. They knew hunger and satisfaction, pain and comfort, fear and triumph. And now they are gone, transformed into stone and memory, and the birds that sing at dawn. But they left us a gift. They left us a story about the deep history of our planet, a story about the power of evolution and the fragility of life, a story about dominance and extinction, success and catastrophe, persistence and change. This is why dinosaurs still matter. Not because they were large or spectacular or terrifying, though they were all those things. They matter because they teach us about our world and our place in it. They matter because they expand our perspective beyond the narrow window of human experience. They matter because they show us that Earth has a history far deeper and stranger than we ever imagined. And they matter because, ultimately, their story is our story. We are part of the same grand narrative, the same unfolding of life on Earth,
We emerged from the same processes that created them. We are subject to the same forces that shaped them and destroyed them. We are not separate from nature, watching from outside. We are part of nature, embedded in its history, dependent on its systems. The dinosaurs remind us that we are temporary, but they also show us that while we are here, we are part of something vast and ancient and ongoing.
We are participants in the greatest story ever told, the story of life itself, evolving and adapting and persisting through billions of years of change. So the next time you see a bird, remember, you are looking at a dinosaur, a survivor of the greatest catastrophe in 66 million years. A creature carrying genes that were forged in the Triassic, refined in the Jurassic, perfected in the Cretaceous, and tempered in the fires of extinction. The age of giants may have ended, but the legacy of dinosaurs endures. In stone, in memory, and in every bird that takes flight against the sky. They ruled the earth for 150 million years. And in a way, they rule still.